it, like he profiles in the receiving game, like an Alvin Kamara. He profiles like some of these other, and we've talked about this in the past, like it just hasn't fully come to fruition. I think they could have to force that, at this point. And so like when you look at Jones, like his targets per route run, his yards per route run, like they're all in the same range, as these elite guys, not quite to Christian McCaffrey level, but like just below that. So I absolutely think that Jones is getting pushed down the board because of A.J. Dillon, and I do think A.J. Dillon probably takes over slightly more of the early down work. But Jones in round 4, I think it's just going to be tough for him to not pay off on his PPR value.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Absolutely. And just in case you guys didn't notice, I snuck in the go live button since we were already basically starting the show.
You know what's funny, Dan? I was like, I thought I had clicked it. And then I saw it went red, and I was like, "Oh, what?" I didn't know if I wasn't sure if I touched it, right? So I was like, "Why is it red?" I was like, "I'll let it go, let him go."
Yeah.
Talking about football.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think Aaron Jones is potentially in a real good spot here. But what do you think that does to AJ Dillon? I mean, do you see him splitting?
Yeah, I think A.J. Dillon's still going to be fine. I think what's going to happen is they're just going to be forced to use Jones more in the passing game. I still think it will be somewhat matchup based. You've even heard Aaron Rodgers talk about it depends on like the linebackers of the other team and some different things like that he's been quoted around, like they're looking for certain matchups. But like just looking at Aaron Jones' underlyings, he didn't get to play as much as some of the other guys. But if you look at his yards per route run, it's a 1.52. That's above DeAndre Swift at a 1.41. Alvin Kamara's at a 1.62. So I mean, like a lot of the McCaffrey's on his own planet, at a 1.91, but Eckler is a 1.55. So if you look at Eckler, targets per route run, 21%, yards per route run is a 1.55. If you look at Alvin Kamara, it's a 0.24, targets per route run, 1.62. Targets per route run, and a 1.62 yards per route run. And then if you look at Aaron Jones, 0.22, 1.52. Like he has the profile to really be an elite receiving back. And like all of his underlying explosive metrics are all still there. PFF rush grade was an 82. DeAndre Swift's was a 57.8. His rushing grade, 83.1, which is what you really care about, over a 61.3 for Swift. His receiving grade, a 72.6. Swift's is a 58.5. I mean, you could argue like really Aaron Jones, like he's older. Yes, he's 28, but he doesn't have a ton of touches on him. Like he's arbitraged DeAndre Swift, and you're getting him 2 rounds later on a better team.
Right, exactly. And as you noted, he doesn't have a lot of touches. Like that tweet that you put out earlier a couple days ago with running back touches. I mean, Jones is one of the older running backs in the league, and
he's not on it. Yeah, he didn't make the list.
Yeah, he's a guy that I think is a nice buy in dynasty right now as well for the reasons you guys are talking about. I think he could have a little bit of longevity to his game. And I think as he gets older, like you said, his targets could continue going up, and he could just live on being a receiver for Rodgers.
Yeah, I think you have to consider this year. I will project him. Right now I've been ranking and I've been doing tiers. Obviously, I got a lot of this data like in my mind, but I try to take like this macro view first, and then like go back and drill in and do all the projections. Just knowing what I know today about Aaron Jones, I'm going to have his range of outcomes between 15 and 20% target share. So I'll have the low end probably around 15% and the high end around 20. Some people may think that's, too high, but I just think again, we'll see what they do in the draft, but I just think that's right. Fully within his wheelhouse, given what we saw in the splits without Adams. And again, just overall the nature of what their offense is going to have to look like, moving forward.
I hope you're ready, Fantasyland, because as you already hear, and that was just the tip, guys, just the tip, because tonight is a monster show. Senior fantasy analyst at PFF, friend of the show, he's back, Dwain McFarland, and he's got some ADP to talk about tonight, and we got tons of names, tons of offenses, guys. Let's get right into the goodness.
Go district, the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing on all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text, that trash offer's the best. You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice, from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man, y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
What is up? What is up, guys? I'm here with my partners in crime, Theo, Dan. We were licking our chops for this one. We even left a bit of a longer break in between shows because this one is so huge tonight.
Yes, definitely. We're excited to have Dwain on tonight.
Yeah, I'm stoked. Dwain's been putting out fire content all off season. Every article you put out is good. It's just like I love the tiers. I love reading your opinions on NFL draft prospects. It's just been good stuff all off season, Dwain.
Oh man, appreciate you guys. I love every guest you guys have on pretty much. So I'm just glad to be on the list. And I've said this before, like one of my favorite things to do is really join other people that I know are drafting. They have a lot of skin in the game and, you're constantly thinking through it. I think, and so Ian Harditz and I next week, starting every Wednesday, we're going to be drafting. Then Brian Drake and I are going to be doing some more stuff on the hustle. And I just think, the more you draft, obviously, the more it sharpens your skills, and you have to really, you really test your convictions. Because I don't know what if you guys, but like when I usually make my first pass in my ranks or tiers, whatever, then you start really getting into drafts, and you'll find certain names that you're passing over, and you're like, okay, why am I have this guy in this tier, but I never take him. Why? And it triggers you. You got to go back, you got to look at him, and either you got to get comfortable with taking him there because you're going to need some exposure, or maybe your gut's right. You want to push him down. And then you have the opposite thing happen. You're like, I got this guy a tier lower, and I find myself like every other draft when I get to the 7th round, I'm just reaching down and grabbing him. Like, am I doing this right? Do I need to relook at it? So for me, it's a good way because we have a lot of knowledge built up just from drafting and playing fantasy football for so long that sometimes you can't always tap into. Even though you're doing all this research until you start drafting. I can't tell you how many times like I've actually found things where I'm handling a certain way in drafts, and I'll go back and look at everything and I'll be like, you know what, like my intuition's right. Like I need to move this player down. I need to move this player up. Sometimes it's wrong and I just need to get comfortable with them. So like this is my favorite time of year because now is really where I start getting into it. Of course, we got the NFL draft right around the corner. It's less than a month away at this point. Once that happens, like we're full tilt, like it's game on.
It's the mental clarity of being on the clock, Dwain. Nothing. It tells the truth.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. And when you're in your groove and your convictions are hitting, like, man, people can't snipe you. They can't do anything. Like you've got a plan, you're ready. It's a great feeling. It's a great feeling.
Yeah. And even if somebody does snipe you, you're like, no, I was ready for that. I've already got another plan. So and
that's what I meant. It's like, you're just ready for plan B, C, D. Yep. You're moving on. Yeah, yep. Exactly.
Doesn't even matter. Yeah. So, and I got to say, Dwain, I mean, the content you've been putting out on Twitter and on Pro Football Focus and on the podcast and everything, it's just fantastic. I mean, you're getting you in with PFF and access to all their stats and everything was like letting the kid in the candy store and just,
that's how I feel for sure.
Yeah, I bet. I can tell. It's fantastic. So yeah, you've come up with a lot of good stuff. Like you had an article, I don't know, 3 weeks back where I think it was Jacob Sanderstrom had been looking at PFF grades for wide receivers, and you like it's totally made a light bulb go off for you. And all of a sudden you're diving into it, and coming up with, okay, maybe this wide receiver, that wide receiver is a good buy.
Yeah, that was a really good one, actually. And Jacob thinks up a lot of smart stuff. There's a lot of really smart people on Twitter. And I mean, just social media in period. I mean, that's the thing I try to use it most for. Like social media can be really toxic. Mm-hmm. But my goal is to go on and share things I think that people might not be able to find elsewhere. And then B, just really like learn from other people or get ideas because people are approaching things from all these different ways. But his specific thing, and I think his actually came from, Drew from Fantasy Bean Counter. And so like really it was him, then it went to Jacob, and then I saw it and I had access to all this data. So I went and started studying it. But basically, if you had a rookie grade for a PFF receiving grade of 75 or better, like basically back until, we've been starting to track this, no matter your draft capital, like you went on to be a really good player. And the cool thing about the metric is, which is what we're always really looking for, because let's face it, like if a player is really good in fantasy one year, it's a strong correlation to them being a good player the next year. So what we're trying to find are what are the edges that could tell us this player wasn't necessarily great last year, but now they could be really good this year. And there's a lot of different paths you could take to that. But like in this particular example, what that grading showed, and so I used a minimum of 200 routes run, but what that grading showed, it picked up on players like Chris Godwin, who didn't show up, really anywhere in fantasy points. It showed Hunter Renfrow before he really got there. And then last year, most importantly, I'm sure we'll eventually talk about it, but Amon-Ra St. Brown graded out as an 80. And so a lot of people are concerned about the 5th round capital. Will Hawkinson wasn't playing, DeAndre Swift wasn't playing. I think what this kind of tells us, and it's not going to be true in every case, but look, man, if you're good enough to go out and demand 30% target share every week, like you have to be good enough to beat whatever the defensive coordinator is throwing at you. And is it a little easier for a slot receiver versus an outside receiver? Yeah, by the nature of you're going to get more looks in zone against linebackers, things like that. But this thing worked for slot receivers alike or deep receivers. So it was pretty awesome. And so finding stuff like that where you can see that, hey, they didn't necessarily break out as far as fantasy players yet, but we're getting this leading indicator that it's probably going to happen. And so I love things like that.
Yeah, and even kind of going the opposite way, like player like Terrace Marshall or Jalen Reagor.
Yeah, and they scored really bad. And I mean, they basically scored in a tier where, it's a very low hit rate. Even if you had high draft capital, if you score that badly, probably not going to happen. There were some examples, though. And the thing is, and that always gets everybody, because the one really, really good one was a superstar, is Devante Adams. But it took him 3 years. To be fair, most people were off of Devante Adams before it ever happened, So
yeah. Yep. Yes, I still vividly remember just before he broke out in the offseason, before he broke out, I almost had one of my league mates convinced to trade me Devante Adams for a 3rd round pick. And he pulled back at the last minute, and he wanted 2/3. And I was like, I don't know.
I traded him away. I traded him away before that season. I thought this is probably my last chance to get like a second, or a third for him. Actually, I think it was like a third because like I drafted him for a second in Dynasty. But it was a situation where they had deterioration of the targets around him. So there was a little bit of a hype going in. And so I did the wrong thing. I made the wrong move on that one for sure.
Dynasty trades that'll haunt you forever, Dan.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So one of the things, I think it's kind of interesting to talk about is, and we just sort of got on it earlier, is running back touches. And I think it's kind of interesting just because we're at a place right now where there are, the running backs that we have are aging right now. There's not that many young running backs. There's a lot of running backs in the 25 plus age range. And, or they're going to be 25 in this coming year. So seeing kind of where they're sitting at touch wise, I think is pretty valuable to see, what's going on. If you look at the tweet that's up, if you're watching on YouTube, it's easy to see. If you're listening to the podcast, Dwain puts down notable running back career touches, including playoffs heading into 2022. Zeke Elliott leads the list at 2,026. Then Melvin Gordon at 1,789, Derrick Henry at 1,664, Alvin Kamara at 1,411, Fournette at 1,363, Mixon 1,359, Dalvin Cook 1,247, and Christian McCaffrey 1,151. And Zeke is younger than all but one of these guys or two of these guys. He's the same age basically as Dalvin and Mixon and Kamara, right?
Yep.
All 25. So, and McCaffrey, I think.
Dalvin's 27.
Oh yeah, Dalvin's 27. Yeah, you're right. And
Dalvin's 27. So
okay.
Who do we got? Kamara's 27. Dalvin's 27. And then you got Zeke's at 27.
27.
So they're all close. Yeah.
Yep.
Henry's the oldest at 28 of the group that we have. Well, Melvin Gordon is the oldest, but then you got next is Derrick Henry. Melvin Gordon right now, I think he'll be 29 this season. All my ages, when you people hear me say them, it's the age they'll be in, when the NFL season starts.
Right. Yep. Yeah, definitely. So, I find it crazy that, Melvin Gordon is like 2 years older than Zeke Elliott. And, it wasn't like Gordon didn't get used either, but he's still, 250 carries behind him, basically, which is almost a full season's worth of work.
Yeah. And if folks are interested, so one of our young, brilliant minds at PFF, his name's Tej Seth. It's Tej and then just Seth. Like he does a lot of stuff. Like he actually just submitted this study. I can't remember where he did this, but he submitted it. Like he and a couple of our other guys have done a lot of different things, as far as, doing these different studies and then presenting them out. And they've done really well, but this was actually one of them. But this one's posted on pff.com. So if you were just to Google PFF, Tej Seth, and then running back workload, like this thing will pop right up. But the actual title of it is Do NFL Running Backs Regress? Facts and Fiction. And the essential, of it is once a running back hits 1,500 carries, and if they're in that 5 to 7 year range, like they really do start to regress. Number one, once running backs are done with their first year, it already starts, like after their rookie season. But you really hit this wall when you get into that year 5-7 range in the 1,500 touch mark. So, and it's actually the 1,500 carries. What I've given here is actually the full touches, and he didn't include the full touches. It was something I had chatted with him about. Mm-hmm. But I just wanted for myself get a look at the absolute total touches for every player. But essentially, like this moved me off of Zeke last year, made me cautious around Derrick Henry. Now, an injury did bail me out, but you could also argue that injuries can become, part of the game. The more and more touches, right, that you get on your body. But it just gave me, a stronger conviction because it made sense to me that you did want to avoid these players. You didn't want to overspend. But once I saw the way he did it, because he did it using rushing yards over expected. And so it wasn't just saying, did their production drop off? So rushing yards over expected, number one, he age adjusted it, but essentially, it's looking at all the different situations that a running back is carrying the ball, right? Was it 3rd and 2 against a stacked box, or was it 3rd and 12 where they ran a draw play, right? Those are two very different things. And so what the expected yardage should be on given play, changes every single play. And so what this data did, it actually compared apples to apples, right? You're not getting an apples to orange kind of comparison, which is really what sets it apart from some of the other studies that we've seen in the past around workloads and running back ages. So Tej did an awesome job with this. And so you guys can go check it out, but it obviously puts multiple names. Like Zeke's an absolute avoid for me this year. I mean, I don't mind getting a few shares of him, because he's so cheap now. I've seen him fall into the 5th round. It's like, okay, you might have a share or two, but it's hard for me to find a path in my mind where I'm like, oh man, if I don't take Zeke, he's going to kill me, even though I like the Cowboys offense. But I think the Cowboys offense is taking a step down from where it was last year. You got offensive line challenges. Amari Cooper's now gone from the offense. Cedric Wilson's moved on. I think the overall ceiling of the Dallas Cowboys offense, I think we have to all, I don't think we have to, but I'm guessing you guys probably agree. It has taken a step back. We still think it's a good offense. But it's last year, I think kind of the story was if you wanted to stick it out with Zeke one more year, maybe you get one of these 15, 20 touchdown seasons. But now I think we've seen enough from Pollard to know they're going to share the backfield. The offense could be taking a step back. And now you've got this enormous workload on Zeke. We've already seen him start to drop off. He's already dropping off. It's just a matter of is Pollard going to eventually steal more away, or do we endure an injury? Or is Zeke just so bad, he can't even average, 3.5 yards per carry? That's within the range of outcomes.
Dan and I were having this conversation before the show about, we talk about everybody reaches a certain point where they become a value, but it's going to be hard for me to take just about any Zeke. When you get to that 5th round and you look at the players that are available against, Zeke, even that early 6th round, I just can't see myself pulling the trigger. I think he's one of the safer bets for a guy to avoid this year. And the other name on that list that I thought was interesting was, I think that especially for our Dynasty listeners, Joe Mixon is really racking up the touches. And I think he's got a little bit of a perception in the Dynasty community that he's not quite as much tread on the tires, but it's creeping up there. He might be a sell if you want to get ahead of the game, if you're following these sort of data metrics.
Yeah, I think he's definitely in the sell mode for Dynasty. Obviously, like your team, are you in the win now window, all those sorts of things. But I mean, Dalvin is in the same boat. I mean, you want to generally, if you can, try to be a year ahead. Like I've got Dalvin on one Dynasty team that is really good. It's got, and it's also got a lot of other young parts on it. So it's like I'm kind of torn. I do have other young players that could probably help carry the team, but I don't necessarily have another like good back if I trade Dalvin. Like I have some guys that I can throw out there. I've still got like a David Montgomery and some other pieces, but I'm definitely considering. I think the perception of these guys, I think we also forget how quickly it changes. It just takes 1 year, man. And the next year, like you look up and you're like, whoa, nobody really wants to. Now you can't right now you might be able to a contender get some sort of a 1st round pick for Mixon. 3 or 4 years ago for players like this, you'd see trades where, somebody would get 2 1st round picks, for a guy like this. Now you're seeing drafters, Dynasty players just getting so much sharper and not being willing to pay unless they are absolutely in a win now window, which limits the number of teams that you can trade with in your league. And now every league's different. Like some leagues, you may still see more of these things, but I think a lot of the backs that we just talked about, you got some tough decisions to make because like once you get to a certain point, then it's almost like, well, you might as well just ride it out because you get to a point where you're just not going to get enough back for what they're going to give you in a weekly roster setting.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And, Melvin Gordon's one of those guys that I've done that with in a couple of leagues. I wrote him out and it was worthwhile, but, I had teams that were able to take advantage of it. And that's the key.
Yeah, I sold Zeke 2 seasons ago and I sold Gordon 2 seasons ago as well.
Right.
I think I was in one of those last, I don't know if my buddy will end up listening to this, but I got 2 1st round picks out of Zeke, and man, it was just the perfect time. Like he was still like thought of as a top 5 back at the time, but I was just like, like the touches are getting so far up there. I'm like, I'm gonna move on. And I had a team that I was like, I need to rebuild anyway, and so I just moved him. I'm so thankful now that I got the 2 1st round picks out of it. He texts me all the time about it. He's like, that's the worst trade I've ever made.
Yep.
I just sold my last Kamara share. This past week, I got 2 firsts for him. I got the 107 and a 2023 first, so I felt great about that. And it's you got to get ahead of it because, like you said, it's when it starts going south for a running back with some tread on the tires, then you're begging for picks coming back.
And a guy like Dalvin, I have him on one of my FFPC teams. I feel like a little more I've been trying to move him all off season, trust me, especially the last couple of weeks. But you guys know how hard it is, especially in the shallower leagues. But I feel a little more comfortable having Madison with Cook. I'm not a big handcuff guy, but I feel like if you have Dalvin, you can kind of like, get the balance between one maybe raising in value and the other guy lowering. And I feel like Hendo out there in LA with the Rams is the other kind of backup that I'm liking right now behind Akers.
Yeah, I think if you have both of them, like in those scenarios, like, and again, depending on like where you are in your win now window, typically those backups that we love end up not being as good as we think. I remember who was it for Ray Rice? Was it Bernard Pierce? I remember I did that with Ray. I was like, I got Bernard Pierce. There's nothing to worry about. Oh yeah, I had a lot to worry about. I just didn't know it. But I really do like Madison. I think Madison is a better player than what we saw with Bernard Pierce. And I think actually a lot of the data and the analytics tell us that, Alexander Madison also probably could we know he's not quite as good as Dalvin Cook from an explosive standpoint and things like that, but he's good enough to run an NFL offense. It's just, do the coaches and do the teams buy into that? Like that's the challenge. And then you get the turnover in the coaching staffs, you get the change in the scheme, things like that I think sometimes throw a wrench in those kind of situations. But I do like that one for sure.
Does Minnesota, Dwayne, have an opportunity there to add a back in this draft? That's one thing I did not even consider. Is that? I
don't think they will. I mean,
they're not really ready, right, for that?
I think last year, I mean, they added in the 5th round. He's special teamer, but he had a really good pro day, ran fast. And so they've got 3 backs. They've got Madison. I mean, they could do anything they want. I mean, it's Kevin O'Connell, so he's coming from the Rams. They're pretty willing, to use multiple backs or run with one. We've seen them do any of those things. I think with Dalvin, the thing that's encouraging, so for Kamara, one, I do think the passing down backs give you a little more cushion if you're in a PPR setting, right? Because then even if they lose some of that explosiveness, that big playability, if you can still get the catches out of the backfield and they still know how to work against linebackers and safeties and coverage. So if you've got a guy that's got an ADOT that's over a 0 or preferably over a 1 and is getting a really good target share like Kamara, I think he's still a good player to trade away. But I think if you had to ride with him, you still could. Whereas some of the other guys like Zeke, he's a swing pass guy. He's not going to add a ton more value, in the passing game. But like Kamara, Theo, you were just talking about him. Last year, he started to drift. So his yards per route run have been 2.84, 2.12. He had a 1.54 in 2020, but then a 2.19. Last year was a 1.62, so second lowest in his career. Targets per route run, because he only played 13 games. That's where I like these per route, type stats that help us whenever players have missed time or they got these different sub packages. But still good, a 0.24. But I mean, we're talking about a guy that's been at 33%, 29%, 27%, 30%. So that was a career low for him. And then, if you look at his explosive play rate, it was also the lowest of his career at 9%. The NFL average is 10.5%. Those are carries of 10.5 yards or more. So he has been a 23% player as a rookie, which was just bonkers. But then he's been 10, 11, 14, so 9%. So he's hit these they're not bad, but career low numbers across the board on a lot of these underlying metrics that are out that aren't just carries, right, and just yards. But it's some of these things that help drive those things, and that's what you start to look for. That's what got me off of David Johnson quicker than the public. So Kamara is checking a lot of those boxes. Dalvin, and it could happen at any time, but he still looks I'm pulling him back up right now. Dalvin still looks pretty good across these metrics. They've slowly used him less and less in the passing game. I don't think it's necessarily just because of a deterioration in skill. It's just that, when you add Justin Jefferson and you got Adam Thielen, the targets just start to go, to other places with the Vikings offense. But if you look at his explosive play rate, still at a 14% last year. The year before was 15. So Dalvin still definitely has some pop. When he's out there, he hasn't lost that. So that's a good thing. But again, it can go really fast. He'll be 27 years. He's starting to get up there in touches. So. But yeah, agree with you guys. It's something you definitely want to pay attention to. And then Dynasty, you want to try to get off the train ahead of time if you can.
And shout out to Frank Mamola, a big-time NFFC player, and my buddy from the New York Super. He's in the chat. He likes Joe Mixon this year in redraft. I do too, Frank. Just a dynasty take.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is, if you've got a win now team in Dynasty, Mixon is perfectly fine. I mean, it would take a big offer to get me off Mixon if I've got a win now team.
He'll be 20. He'll only be 26. I mean, so I mean, he's not quite the 27. It starts between years 5 and 7. So he's definitely in the window. He's going into year 6. My biggest challenge with Mixon is that last year we finally had Gio Bernard gone, and so there was really this. And the thing is, we saw Mixon in college be a pretty good receiving back at Oklahoma. And they still wouldn't give it to him. It's really you have to have Samaje Perine on the field. I just don't get it. And then I think Chris Evans is probably actually better than Perine. My guess is Evans will probably take Perine's role. And so my hopes of Joe Mixon, full down every down workload, Joe Mixon, I think it's over. I'm giving up on it. I'm just backing away from the table. So last year, I mean, he scored 3 touchdowns above expectation, which helped offset that. Now, he's also playing in an offense that could be the number one offense in the league. So there's a lot of positive things that are going right, for Joe Mixon. So I like him as well. It's just that he doesn't get used in the passing game. So like him a little less in PPR, like him more in standard.
Curious, Dan, what would you take if you're a Mixon owner, like in an FFPC format? What do you think would be a good price right now?
I mean, honestly, if you want to talk about draft picks, I don't think I would come off Mixon for less than like the 101 or 102. I'd want to be able to, for sure, flip right over to Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker, something like that. Now, if you're talking about a package, then it gets a little bit different. There's a lot more different things that might work, but I'm still going to want one elite piece in there somewhere to move off of them.
Yeah, just a guy that I haven't seen traded too often in Dynasty this offseason at all.
It's got to be a pivot of some sort. Like you're not going to just let it go for a bunch of seconds and thirds. You got to get, like Dan said, either a high first or like a late first, early second, and pair him up with like a Josh Jacobs or like that kind of range price if you're going to pair him up. But again, you probably want to go younger, right, with that pivot piece.
Yeah.
Yep. This
is the angst of Dynasty. Like, these people that we land like Justin Jefferson, and you'll see people be like, yeah, I'm selling now. Value will never be higher. I'm like, yeah, but I want him on my roster.
Yeah.
Right? I want to just let the guy play. Like, I get it. Like now is probably peak season, like to sell a player like Justin Jefferson, but like receivers last longer. But this kind of stuff happens all the time. And you get to year 3 and 4 of backs and people are starting to think about it. Like, and some people just trade a lot. Like I'm more like middle of the road, like trader. Like some people trade like all the time. But I like to, once I get like my team set, and I get some of these guys on there that I want, and I establish my core. Like I don't make as many moves as some of the other players in my leagues. Like some of them don't trade at all. So I'm definitely not that person. Like I'm always looking to see, like, is there a way to make the team better? And I swear some people, I'm just like, man, you can never enjoy your team. Like you're just like, you're constantly just, it's at peak value. Got to make a move. Peak value. Got to make a move. What I wonder is what percentage of people, like when you get a player like Justin Jefferson, like what's the percentage chance you're really going to make up and get more out of what you're getting, like, or hit anything close to that, like no matter what your haul is. Like, so, obviously there's a price for everything. But for me, I struggle with that sometimes. I'm just like, okay, great. Like you got 3 first-round picks and whatever, some throw-in player like Amari Cooper. I'm like, I don't know. I think I still may want Justin Jefferson, like at his age. Like,
well, the thing is, you're chasing after Justin Jefferson with those picks anyways,
yes,
right? Like,
you're trying to get the next
so
Justin Jefferson.
When you have it, why are you giving it away for more lottery tickets, or lottery picks when you already have the jackpot?
And let's be real clear. Nobody knew Justin Jefferson was going to be the stud of that class. Nobody. I'm sure somebody knew, but that was not a big take. People liked him, but like he was. He wasn't even. I remember like in redraft that year, he wasn't even going like in 20-round FFPC drafts at one stage in the summer. Because supposedly, he wasn't going to be able to be. I can't remember who it was now that he wasn't going to be able to be. Olabisi Johnson. He was behind Olabisi Johnson on the depth chart. So, like, knowing how to land these players, we all have to practice. I think, or we need to realize that we're only so good at this. Like, and we miss a lot too. So I'm with you, JD. It's like I feel like I could be chasing that for the next 4 years and not get it right.
Could have just made an offer after week 2 for Justin Jefferson when he was cut in a bunch of redraft leagues and turned into the greatest waiver wire wide receiver pickup.
I picked him up everywhere when that happened. I did too. He was huge for me.
I think the problem is, guys, you're watering down your roster, right? And unless you're perfect, like we're saying that we're far from it, you're basically watering down the potency of your roster by moving those pieces when they are there. Like the Diggs, the guys that are those high end power pieces at the RB position, receiver position. Yeah, people are looking to move them when they reach that peak, but they're not realizing, like, dude, that's how else are you going to win this league? You need those players on your team.
Right. Yeah. Basically 300 point a year players are very rare birds
that are not quarterbacks.
Yeah, they're not quarterbacks. And if you've got one of them, it's got to take a ton to get you off them because they can win you any week. They can be the guy who wins you that week. And if you can somehow manage to get 2 of them, if you've got one 300 point guy, you don't want to be looking to trade him. you want to be looking to find a way. How can I add another 300-point guy to this guy? And just you can churn 2 or 3 or even 4 starting positions if you've got 2 or 3 300-point guys, and you're probably going to come out with a very good record, and it puts you in a great position for the playoffs when the big weeks really, really matter. So I don't know. I think you've just got to hang tight on those guys.
Oh, I thought I had a mix-in trade for you guys, but this is from 20. For some reason, DTC still has a July 2021 trade on here, so we'll X that one.
Maybe we talk about another back, James Conner.
Yes.
So Dwain, maybe you could share your thoughts. I know you have him as your number 7 best ball running back right now, ahead of a number of guys. Where are you at on Conner right now?
Yeah, so for me with Conner, I think it's pretty simple. Like, we saw what it looked like last year when you didn't have Chase Edmonds in the backfield. And you're taking on a player that is a very, stylistically, he's a player that, creates a lot of contact that may not always be necessary. He can definitely get dinged up. He avoided that this season until the very end. But, I mean, if you look at James Conner, week 9, you had Chase Edmonds basically leave right away at the beginning of the game. He was RB1. Next week, without Edmonds, RB17. Next week, RB7, RB12, RB2. And then to finish the year, week 18, he was an RB1. And that's where he actually got hurt on the last play of the game, I believe. So when you see something like that, and we know that we've got the history of looking at Cliff Kingsbury, that we've seen him really be willing, for spurts of time to just run some of these guys into the ground, got a decent contract for, a back. Cardinals probably actually overpaid. But whenever you look at him, his touches just aren't too far up there, for his age. So really, he fits the same profile as some of these other guys. I mean, at this point, I don't care about draft capital. He's got his contract. There's nobody else there. I do think that James Conner, and then I know another one we'll talk about in a minute, probably will be Leonard Fournette. I do think those two guys are probably of the backs I have ranked inside the top 10. They are probably the two that are most likely to receive competition through the draft, which could change really, where they sit. And I expect that if either of those teams don't spend an early pick, on a running back, when I say early, I don't think either one will do a day 1 pick. I guess they could, but a day 2 pick, round 2, round 3, or a really early round 4 pick can sometimes do it, like a Michael Carter last year that we saw. But if they avoid that, I don't see how these guys don't move up. I don't consider James Conner really, honestly, the typical dead zone running back in this scheme, because we've already seen him do it. We're not just saying, oh, well, there's carries, we're going to give it to him. We've already seen what James Conner can do. So I just think it's going to be hard. And yes, this is me really thinking, like I said, I haven't projected all these players, but I just know how James Conner is going to project. If they don't add anybody else, and I know people talk about Eno Benjamin, but look, let's just face it. Eno Benjamin's been around long enough. If he was going to really be this threat, and there were even games last year where Eno Benjamin could have been more of a threat with James Conner when Chase Edmonds was out, and he wasn't. He was RB57, RB50, RB56. Is it possible Eno Benjamin takes a step forward? Maybe. He's a guy that I did like coming out of college. But whenever I see folks use that as their reason, I'm not going to sweat it. It's a good offense. So in dead zone running backs, I think there are exceptions. Whenever they forecast really well from a projection standpoint, we know that, that he just got, the money. So they're probably going to use him. And the Cardinals offense, we expect to be pretty good. They have a really good quarterback, in Kyler Murray. So I know I'm well ahead of, where ADP is right now over at FFPC, which is round 5, which is fine. I feel like that's insane. That you can get him, that cheap.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's not like Connor's never been good before either. Last year was not his first time being good. Mm-hmm. He smashed in replacing Lev Bell the first year that Bell was out. And then after that, then he got injured the next year, and then the Steelers were crappy the year after that. So he kind of, he fell into the weeds a little bit, and it was just tough to see his talent coming through. But then all of a sudden he gets on the Cardinals with this make good contract, and he gets the opportunity, and all of a sudden he's smashing again.
Yeah, to me, he's a no-brainer over Zeke. over Josh Jacobs. Even J.K. Dobbins, a younger player, but we know that Lamar is going to get part of the carries. And why would we believe Gus Edwards is just going to go away when they signed him to a contract last year before he got hurt? David Montgomery, like if you want to like put him in that range, I could see why some people would. But I mean, I want him over Cam Akers. I want him over Saquon Barkley. I think I definitely want him over Antonio Gibson. And here's the way I look at it. Players have also gotten sharper. So it's not like you're going to have to draft James Conner. Probably, I don't know. He could get to the second round, I guess. Like that's about as high as I think he would get, but probably won't. I think like his ceiling will probably be creeping into the third round because of the way people think about these players now. But I think to sit back and say that a player like James Conner, he's the opposite of Zeke. Like I don't think you can sit back and say, well, James Conner, I'm not taking him in the fifth round just because I can't see a path where he couldn't outscore everybody else in the round. There's absolutely a path like to him doing that. So I feel like the price is right. So if I can get James Conner in the fifth round, in the fourth round, even late third round, depending on how I want to build my team, I'm definitely going to do it. I'm not going to get nuts and put him in the second round because there's a ton of great receivers we want there. And every year, like where these breaks are a little bit different, right? And how we think about, our tiers. It's not like, it's every year the same formula and like we just remix it over again. So like when I look at the overall board and I'm looking at the receivers and stuff that are going, around James Conner, there's quite a few names there. Like I really love Elijah Moore, but I'll take James Conner over Amari Cooper. Like I just would, you can argue like I like Jerry Judy. He's a young receiver, but it's a complete projection. Like there's a very good chance James Conner outscores Jerry Judy. Like it's and we can't just say he's not
James
gonna.
Conner could be this year's Leonard Fournette, to be honest.
Yes, well he was last
or
year's
this year's
Fournette.
or he could be
over
he
the
could
end
be
of the season.
This year's, yeah, exactly.
Yep.
He could be this year's James Conner.
Yeah. I think those two guys, like especially the underdog drafts, which I am not allowed to do anymore as of today, which I want to cry. But it's those guys are going at serious value, especially like a couple weeks ago. Those two guys were really nice value in those underdog best ball drafts.
Yeah,
I think the most interesting thing about Conner is Chase Edmonds has had 120 targets the last two seasons combined. And I think that we've already seen Conner have a 70 target year in Pittsburgh. I think he could set a career high for targets this year. And just that could be his absolute smash season.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody's saying, oh, they're not going to use or they're not going to use some other back. I mean, I don't see Conner as being, some bell cow who's going to get 90% of the carries or anything like that, or 90% of the touches. But, you just know he's going to get the lion's share and he's going to do well with them.
Yeah, well, and today's NFL, really a bell cow is what? I mean, I think if you can get to 70%,
right,
65, 70%, that's pretty much what we're looking for.
Right.
I mean, but he had games last year when you had Eno Benjamin out, 19% of the targets, 13% of the targets, 14%, 13%, 19%, and 16%. So, I mean, he's going to be 12 to 15% target share in the game. I mean, he could get dinged up and miss games, but I think that's what he's going to be close to. And they love him down inside the 5. He's going to get touchdown regression. Like he got really lucky with the way touchdowns worked out for him last year.
Oh,
and I think that's another thing that people are using to really, for the reason they want to fade James Conner. I'm just not, I don't get it. Like fine, don't take him in the second round, but once you get late third, get in the fourth, and it's definitely when you're in the fifth round, I think at that point there's arguments that you can make, for a player like James Conner. Look, and I avoided running backs like the plague in those rounds last year, but I don't think you can blanket take, some of these approaches and say, well, I did this last year, so I'm just going to do this year. You've got to look at the context of like all the players that are going in those ranges. And I think there's a lot of things to like, about James Conner.
Yeah. Dwayne, I got to say, man, that quaff is like 101, the 101 of the night. I know Theo's putting up a good fight right beside you, but damn. Dude,
I like Theo's.
Serious quaff.
No, Dwayne, you got it tonight. You got it. It's a powerful quaff.
My wife's a hairstylist, so like I give
it's looking good.
There you go.
From a man who's got none, I appreciate it.
Well, appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, kind of going back to your point on Jerry Judy, I mean, Jerry Judy's somebody that we're still trying to make happen. I mean,
but
Judy
Dan, have you seen those
yet.
highlights? Come on, man. Are you not watching Instagram? Dude.
Yes.
And I like Jerry Judy, but
right.
I think, see, here's my thing. and I need to put this into an article, and maybe you guys might have some ideas. Like, I got to figure out how to do it, but like, we can't only think of upside as being young players. I think we're getting overboard. James Conner in the 5th round has upside. He absolutely does. Mm-hmm. I think this year there's quite a few backs that are in the dead zone. Like you look at David Montgomery, and now we're not worried about Tariq Cohen. I know Tariq Cohen wasn't a thing, but to begin the season last year, we didn't know he was going to miss the whole season. We just thought that eventually he'd be back and he'd take some of the passing down role. Now, Khalil Herbert's probably going to spell him on early downs quite a bit, but like David Montgomery's still a young back, and now he's probably maybe he could be the second target in their offense. I mean, and he's not old. So I think, some of these things, like I get the Mike Davis thing. Someone that's never really done anything, and we just want to plug him in and give him all these carries. I mean, to your point, Dan, James Conner's already done this. He's already done it before. This is not an unknown commodity. The biggest thing you're trying to avoid is an injury or all of a sudden an extreme drop-off in production, which could happen. And it is you carry that risk with running backs. It's a lot higher. But I feel like you have to.
Dwayne, just because of his health history, again, I'm not knowing. Is there any chance they do draft a running back to put someone behind him? Thinking that Eno's not the guy just because of the health concerns there.
I think they very easily could. In fact, Cliff Kingsbury is already on the record of saying we'll see what we do in the draft when he was talking about Eno. Okay. And so I think that if they add a passing down back, more like what they had with Chase Edmonds, that would be the biggest concern to me, because then I could see them really going back to more of a split like what they had last year before the injuries between him and Edmonds. And so I think right now, if you're drafting now, even though I've got him ranked high, like that's kind of the advice I give. Like, I mean, it's going to be kind of hard to screw it up. Even if you took James Conner last year in the 5th round, went for the games he played together with Chase Edmonds, he still would have given you value.
Right.
He still
my question relates more to, because especially running backs, I love going to get the guy. Like, let's say they did draft a running back in the draft, I'm for sure going to buy James Conner for cheap. And we're going to name other guys tonight. Like I can't wait to talk about Carter and see your thoughts on Singletary's another guy that those values can dip easily after the draft. And I mean, it's the bargain bin specials that you go and you get yourself 3 or 4 of those guys to give you some good starts.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing with Conner, and you guys tell me what you think, they would have to draft a back pretty early for his ADP to drop from where it's at. I feel like people have almost kind of already priced in like worst case scenario for James Conner, unless like they draft Breece Hall. Like if they draft Breece Hall, obviously James Conner should fall. But if they draft like Kieran Williams, or they draft, like a Kevin Harris or something like that in the 5th or 6th round, like, man, I'm not sweating that for James Conner. Like at that point, I think his ADP will go up, which means right now is a good time to be drafting James Conner. My guess is the most likely scenario, without an absolute bomb hitting, would be his ADP, improving throughout the summer, which makes him a value now.
Where is that? I know I'm throwing questions at you there, not
good, yeah.
but like, where's that point with the rookie running backs right now, where you're thinking, with pure brain fart, with what you were just talking about. Oh man,
like the guys you don't want to see land on your players' teams.
Yes, that's exactly my question. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's really 2 main ones. Spiller would have been. I'm like the one going on a brain fart, thinking of Isaiah Spiller. Thinking of the old Spiller. He's the opposite. His athletic profile is the opposite of CJ Spiller. Isaiah Spiller's hasn't really checked any of the boxes there, but nice player. But I think it's really, I mean, you don't want Breece Hall landing there. You don't want Kenneth Walker landing on your team. But I think once you get past that, like, I'm not saying any of these guys couldn't be good, but like a good complementary back, like that could maybe work in passing down. Like Zamir White wouldn't probably bother me that much with James Conner. Like I would think, okay, maybe he's going to take over for James Conner eventually. But like James Cook, like a guy that we know could have a receiving profile, Rashad White, like that would probably bother me more. So I think it is a little bit like dependent on the backfield.
Okay.
But the main thing I think, to keep it simple, you just don't want them to spend a round 2 pick for sure. And you'd really rather avoid a 3rd round pick, like, because those are the picks where they're more than likely going to try to force getting the player onto the field. Damian Pierce is someone that that folks think could really be more of a hybrid gadget type player in the NFL. So like if you could see a Kingsbury falling in love, right, with a player like that, he just wants to use around the line of scrimmage, like what he did last year with Rondell Moore, since apparently he's finally going to let him run a route like further than 5 yards down the field this year. So I think it is a little bit dependent, on the current backfield, how good the current starter is. But overall, like I want to avoid picks from the first 3 rounds landing, on my teams. And I do think Fournette and Connor are at the most risk of something like that happening, just because, they're 27 years old. They got some decent money from their teams, but they also don't have a lot of competition behind them. So it would make sense for them to add a back, even if the back ended up not being able to really compete for the starting job, but they need depth. They just don't. Like Keyshawn Vaughn has done nothing. Eno Benjamin has not shown anything yet. My guess is they're at some point going to add a back, both teams.
Yep, for sure. So let's get into some of those murky backfields and kind of think about what might happen. Like the Jets, obviously, they've got Michael Carter, who's looked real good. He's got some, the metrics on him look great. But you also have to take a look at the Jets draft picks, and they've got, I believe, 2 picks in the second, 2 picks in the third. I wouldn't expect them to use first round pick, of course, but they've got a lot of picks kind of in that sweet spot where they could end up with a Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker or whoever. What do you think are the risks there? Are you still in on Michael Carter at like, say, 6th round in best ball, 5th round in best ball?
He's like RB25-ish.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to be putting out an article next Tuesday, and I've got like 3 buckets that I'm putting certain players in. So one is I'm not drafting them right now because I think folks basically have their absolute best case rose-colored glasses scenario in mind. A great example of this is Trey Lance. Like if you're over on Underdog, you got to take Trey Lance is like QB7. Like that's nuts. Like there's no reason. His ADP, if everything goes right, they trade Jimmy, release Jimmy. They already have 3 elite weapons. They're not adding more. Like Trey Lance is not going to move up from there really in ADP. Like, and if you look at the guys above him, like there are pure barriers.
But Dwain, I'm not going to take Kirk Cousins. Come on. That's why Trey Lance is going there, because it's like Kirk Cousins is next, man. I want that upside, baby.
No, and I get it, but my point is like Trey Lance's ADP, if everything goes right for him, is probably the same as it is today. But if Jimmy G hangs around on the roster, we start hearing more and more, stuff around the rumor mill. Oh, Jimmy G could start. Like Trey Lance. We saw this last year with Jalen Hurts. Like the diehard fantasy community jumped all over Jalen Hurts early, drove up his ADP. Then the casuals entered the room, and guess what happened? It all dropped back down. So Trey Lance is an example of a guy that I want exposure to, but I'm not buying right now if I'm drafting. Then you have this other bucket that's just really like, man, you absolutely want to get your hands on these players right now because as far as I can tell, I don't really see a way for them to go except up. Then there's a third bucket, which is really a straddle, and so straddle is where Michael Carter's at. Like if you look at where he's going in ADP right now, if the Jets don't draft a back because he's young, because of the profile you talked about, Dan, he showed explosiveness last year, really good out of the backfield. Another player that profiles similarly to a step below, not quite the route runner that Kamara and some of these other guys are, but again, another guy that had an ADOT over, it was a 0.3, which you want to see. That's typically sticky. You get these minus ADOTs, they're just swing pass backs, they're check downs. As the offense improves, those targets go away. But with Michael Carter actually working down the field, targets per route run, really good at 23%, yards per route run, 1.48, really good for a running back. So with Carter, I don't want to force it all the time, in best ball, but I definitely want to go ahead and get some shares now because if no one's drafted, people are going to pick up on these things and people already know him, but he has a chance to probably move up in ADP. Whereas if they take it back, his ADP is definitely going to take a hit. So I don't want to be overweight on a player like Carter, but I really do like him, man. I like the profile. I like what they're doing with their moves. They've added 2 tight ends. That tells us they want to get heavy. I know they re-signed Braxton Berrios too, so they have the ability to run 11 or 12 personnel. Last year, they didn't really have the personnel to try to run a 49ers style offense, and so they're really beefing themselves up to do that. Now, Dan, to your point, like they have a lot of picks, so you're right. They have 2 firsts, they got 2 seconds, they got a third, and they got 2 fourths. They have 2 fifths. Mainly, you're trying to avoid, and Carter was one of those high 4th round picks last year. I believe he was 108. They've got the 111 this year. So, I mean, they got 4, 10, 35, 38, and 69. You need to avoid a back. And I think my guess is like they could very easily add a back. Like you could see them, or in the early 4th round, like add a guy like Zamir White. Say, hey, we want our early down pounder, and then we want really more of our, speed back.
That's exactly what I'm thinking they do. Like an early round pounder type of, like, is Algier one of those type of, he's kind of like that, isn't he?
He's kind of like that. I don't think he's gonna. He seems to be sliding, like in the latest, like grinding the mocks and stuff like that. But yeah, I think he definitely fits. He's one of the bigger backs. So I think they could definitely go in a direction like that. What you really don't want to see is they get into the 2nd round and they pull the trigger on Kenneth Walker. That would be terrible for Michael Carter. Obviously, that's the one you want to avoid. Because Kenneth Walker actually profiles as someone that could probably play pretty well in that scheme. So that's, I think, here's the good news. If that happens, you get to go ahead and just buy into Kenneth Walker.
Exactly.
And Kenneth Walker probably really becomes the early down guy, but Carter's going to have a role. I think he's shown enough. Like, it's not easy to get, the type of targets on a per route basis. Not many running backs do that. Like, you'll see a lot of guys in that 15, 16, 17% range. To be up at 23%, they really like him. And if you guys know Jay Moyer, like Jay Moyer last year profiled Carter as being a really good fluid receiver out of the backfield, and that came to fruition. So, but if we could avoid those things, it would be great. I wish I don't want to say this. Jet fans will be mad at me. I'm glad you guys have all these picks, but for Michael Carter, I wish they didn't have so many picks.
Well, and he got out of free agency, right? And you're thinking, thank God, But now it's like you got to go through another, whatever you call it. What's that gladiator game?
Yeah, it's like what James Robinson did last year. He made it through the free agency thing. He was the big winner, and then boom, ETN in the 1st round.
Just brutal.
Yeah, for sure. What about the Dolphins? I think that's a really intriguing team because, they added Edmonds and they added Mostert. They've still got, and then they signed Salvin Ahmed, and they've still got Gaskin. But they stripped out a lot of their draft picks by signing Hill, trading for Hill. So that kind of puts them in a place where I think, the backfield is probably pretty complete. I don't see them adding a whole lot there. What do you think, Dwain? Do they add anybody else?
I want to get Theo's thoughts first on this one, because we had a DM going back and forth. I do agree, Dan. I think the backfield's probably set. I think you're right on that.
Okay. So I feel like Edmonds is. I hit Dwain up in the DMs about this. I feel like Edmonds is the value there. It was the first back they signed in free agency, so they put a significant amount of money into signing Edmonds. I think that getting Tyreek Hill makes the offense better as a whole, and I think that Edmonds could just live underneath. I'm not as scared of Mostert as I think some people might be. I think that Mostert is older. Mostert signed for less money. I think that there's a chance that he sees a big role like as the season starts. But I think Edmonds is going to lead the backfield in touches. I just think he's a good value right now. I think he's the kind of guy that, if you need a flex or if you're punting RB2, you can wait on Edmonds. And I'm a little bit bullish about Edmonds this year. Curious to see your thoughts, Dwain, and also Dan's.
Yeah, I mean, right now, like his ADP has really not moved much. I mean, he had been a 10th, 11th, 12th round pick. I mean, I guess it has. It's moved up a couple of rounds. But I mean, you can get him in the 8th, 9th, and sometimes still even in the 10th round over in FFPC draft. So 9th, 10th rounds, like I love Chase Edmonds. Like that's gonna increase. Like people are gonna come to their senses.
For sure.
Yep. Yeah. Like a lot of people don't really even know how many picks all these teams have. Like what you were talking about, Dan. They don't even know that this thing's probably landlocked. Like it's not really gonna change. So yeah, I do like him from that standpoint. I think there is a risk of a committee, but I think Edmonds still definitely is the best back. Like he's never handled over 25%, of his team's touches. Some of that can go to the players, that he's been playing with. But I think, like right now, and again, I'm like really starting to move into my projections, like in Cardinals, I've kind of started to look at. But I mean, I'm going to have trouble projecting him for less than like 45 to 50% of the rushing attempts. And then probably, I do think there's a chance he doesn't quite get the love we want in the passing game, but he's definitely shown to be capable of that because that style offense doesn't always get the ball to the running backs. There are years where they do it, but it's typically when they don't have other playmakers because that offense is about bringing the defense down to defend the run, but then using play action off of that to get into the layers behind the defense, with the guys like Hill, they got Devo Samuel, in San Francisco, but Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, will really be working, that intermediate area. And so they'll have definitely Edmonds out there on the perimeter, but really what they're trying to do, use all those other players to create the space for them. And so I don't know that he'll get the targets we want, but I think it's definitely in the range of outcomes. I mean, because he's shown, that he can do it. I mean, last year he had a really good year as far as, his targets per route run. So right now, I mean, I've got Chase Edmonds as my RB 27, but he's really in a tier, so it doesn't just mean I think I've got him with Elijah Mitchell is in this tier. Michael Carter's in this tier. Chase Edmonds is in the tier. So like I've got him right there. Kenneth Walker's actually in the tier right now. So he is a player that I like. I definitely want to get exposure to him at that ADP. I think that's pretty ridiculous, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. And, actually, I think Mostert being there kind of almost helps out because Edmonds is somebody that you don't want handling too much of the load. I think
it also helped us keep the ADP down because people they see, oh, well, a player got added. They don't look at the contract. They don't think about always necessarily all the factors. But I'm with you guys. I think it was you, Dan, that specifically said you said it too, I think, Theo, but I'm just not as concerned about Mostert. I think he will get some carries, and they're not just they're not going to give Chase Edmonds 70% of the work. But I'm not concerned about. I've seen some people, even throw out there like some really big names. Like, yeah, Mostert, this is the name to own in this backfield. I'm not on that bandwagon at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, Edmonds is going to be one of those players, like at the end of the year, you'd be surprised if he finishes higher than, like RB 15 or so. But if he stays healthy, you'd also be surprised if he finished lower than where you've got him at 27. A
lot of things to like, man. Targets per route run are good, and the explosiveness. 16% of his carries went for 10+ yards. That's a great mark. The average in the NFL over the last 3 years is 10.5%. So he's well above that. And there's no doubt that's what Mike McDaniel saw. He saw, I need another Elijah Mitchell that can give me these big plays. And I think that's what he went after Edmonds for. And then they're kind of similar in their build and everything else. So I definitely think that there's some upside with Edmonds. And man, if you draft him in the 9th round and he ends up finishing, in the top 20 backs, that's just printing free money. And that's something you can really bake into a strategy of how you're going to handle your backfield in these drafts. And the cool thing about a player going in the 9th, 8th round, you don't mind getting overexposed to them because if they don't work out, you'll replace them in free agency or you'll do something else or somebody else that you take later has a potential to hit. You don't want to be overexposed too much in early rounds, but as the draft goes on, I care less and less about being overexposed. In fact, I build my draft strategy around usually a handful of 15 to 20 players that I love past the 7th round that I think give me the flexibility to do some different things in the early rounds and think about my roster construction and also just be thinking multiple steps ahead of the competition. If I know I want to own, 4 to 5 players out of this pool of 20 and based on the way the draft's going, I know am I going to be hitting the receiver pool? What does it look like? The running back? And every year it's different. Some years there's a ton of receivers I love in that range, but no running backs. Other years, like this year, it's kind of shaping out, man. Some of these backs, where they're going, it's this is gonna be a very easy year to go 0 RB, just because you could go out of the box 4 receivers or 3 receivers and an elite tight end, and you could still then go grab James Conner. You could grab a guy like Chase. I mean, you could easily grab 5 backs between rounds 6 and 12 and feel really good about it. At least right now, no. ADP is going to move, but right now I feel that way.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And to speak to your strategy, I mean, last year I was loading up in James Conner in the 9th and 10th round, and that worked out pretty okay.
Are you? Do you live in a mansion now? You might have already lived in a mansion, but is it a bigger mansion?
Bigger mansion, yes. And a lot of times, there's just kind of that fear that keeps, especially in the early season, it keeps ADPs down. And I think Devin Singletary is one of those guys where fear is the only thing really keeping his ADP down.
Mm-hmm.
What do you?
And he's a straddle guy too. Like he's a guy that I have in the same bucket as Carter.
I love that straddle.
If they add a back, his ADP is going to fall. If they don't, I don't think it'll climb as much as Carter because Carter's still younger and people are excited about him. But I think that people will come to their senses a little bit on Singletary, and you're going to see his ADP move up.
Right. Yeah, people are going to start looking at what he did down the stretch last year, and they're going to.
Man, it took people forever to catch on to that. Like I was just like I couldn't believe, like, even in DFS, like people just kept refusing, even though, like, I mean, we had the clear buying signals, like go for it for weeks. Like got to ride that train for a while. It was nice.
Yep.
How about how about the Browns, Dwain? Do you think that they're going to hold on to all three? You think Kareem Hunt could be a sneaky, trade guy?
Man, I would love it just to see him and Chubb. Like if we could get them both in situations, man. Like Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt for that matter too. Like, but Nick Chubb, if we could just have him as the 65-70% down back, man, like he would be Derrick Henry. Like it would happen, man. The dude is so freaking good. Explosive run rate, 15%. Remember, I said the NFL average over the last 3 years is 10%, 10.5%. You look at his, missed tackles forced, per attempt, like he is number 3 in the league. Devante Williams was number 1 in that one, but he was 25%. The league average, 17%. Look at his yards after contact, number 1. And he's number 1 all the time, 4.25. The league average on that one, 2.93. So, I mean, like he dominates everything. Like he is such a good running back. And then, you go down, you look at a guy like Kareem Hunt, and like just after you look at that, you're like, wow, like how does he not just get everything? Well, Kareem Hunt, missed tackles forced per attempt, 27%. Again, league average 17%. Explosive rush rate, 15%. Average is 10.5%. Yards after contact, 3.45. The average is 2.93. So like they're both like really, really good running backs. Kareem Hunt, the difference is, right, the 23% targets per route run. Like this dude, like in a PPR league, like could be an absolute nightmare on the right team. So Theo, I don't think they're going to do anything just because they don't have a lot of weapons. You got Amari Cooper and you got hopefully David Njoku can step forward, but let's be honest, Njoku's never done anything. Like he's been a first round pick for a long time. So it's not like the Browns haven't wanted David Njoku to be good. Deshaun Watson can't solve everything once he's on the field. Players still have to do their part. Obviously, it does help everything. You make the offense better, but I feel like Kareem Hunt right now, like needs to be a very active part, of the passing game. And unfortunately that comes at the expense of Chubb because they don't necessarily want them both on the field.
Well, with Landry gone, does that open up a bit more kind of short, from the backfield passing note to?
Yeah, I think it could because you're right. Because of where the area that Landry works. And Hunt's shown the chops, man. Like he's in that not quite elite, but really good receiver range as far as a running back goes. So they could do a lot more with him. The problem is and everybody will always be like, oh, get them both on the field at the same time. It's just strategically for football, like it's just tough because if you have Nick Chubb out there, you're really better off with a fullback. 1, you got to keep the defense honest to the run. 2, if you're going to hand the ball to Nick Chubb, you'd rather have Janovich blocking than Kareem Hunt's not going to do anything in the blocking game. And then if you're in a passing down, like Nick Chubb kind of becomes a 0. And so you're hurting yourself by not having another receiver out there. So the problem is the only path to getting them both on the field is at the expense of each other, right? There's not a real tactical way to make it work. I remember a couple of years ago when everybody's like, oh, Kareem Hunt's going to play the slot. Like I didn't buy into it, but he's good enough. Like he could definitely do some of that. But man, Theo, I don't know. I would love to see it. We did see him re-sign Dearness Johnson. There have been some a little bit of smoke around the possibility that Kareem Hunt, could be moved, could be even a surprise cut. It's just with their current roster construction, man, I just struggle to see it. Like they just don't have enough playmakers. Like I like Amari Cooper,
especially if you're bringing in Watson. You gotta have
yeah. I mean, it'd be different. Like if they had another.
Imagine trading Kareem Hunt to Seattle for Tyler Lockett.
That would work.
There you go, Dan.
That's funny. I was thinking Seattle, but I couldn't figure out who they'd bring back. But I actually like that, Dan. That's a good one.
My problem though was Seattle is like we would get like 20 plays. Their offense runs 20 plays a game. Like
Right. Oh, it would be horrible for Hunt for sure.
No joke. Did you guys know Seattle's offense ran 2 games less worth of plays than the average NFL offense last year? If you calculate plays per game and then you calculate that out, for games played, like 2 games less. And if you compared them to the Bills, Josh Allen basically ran almost 4. He got to play 4 games more than Russell Wilson based on plays.
So Pete Carroll's offense is literally like paint drying, is what you're telling us.
Yes. It's horrendous. Like there's nothing worse. 55 plays a game.
Is he ever leaving, or is he like that guy that just
I don't know.
That guy who stays at the party and never leaves?
It's about to come quickly. He thinks he's not leaving, but they're about to suck so freaking bad. Like this,
so.
Russell Wilson was it. That's the only thing that was holding that team together, and now he's gone. I would not be surprised if the Seahawks won 2 games this year.
Wow.
Yeah, they're going to be terrible.
All right, they'll have the 101 next year. There you go.
Yep. All right. On to the Jaguars. How about, there's another interesting situation. We got Doug Peterson, who kind of seems to prefer a committee. Right now, it's basically Etienne and James Robinson. And Robinson is trying to come back from an Achilles. Etienne's trying to come back from a foot injury. This is a team where I'm looking at the backfield. I'm kind of almost right now going, I have no clear view of it, and I really kind of want no part of it where those guys are going.
Yeah, and I'm interested in y'all's thoughts as well. Like for me, I'm just ETN profiles is the type of player like that I want exposure to in the rounds where he's going. Like if it gets way out of hand, I may not continue to stay on the bandwagon, but he's a player that now look, there's several guys that I really love from a film perspective that don't like ETN, like all of his game. But what I like about him is he is an explosive player. He was an explosive player in college, created a lot of explosive plays. Maybe some of those will be gone, because he may try to get to the perimeter too often, but still it's a skill that translates pretty well to the NFL. Like explosive players pretty much continue to be explosive. And so then if you look at the next layer, what's the other thing he was really good at in college? And it was catching passes. So you've got a back that still has the GM in place with Balky, has first round draft capital, invested, is a guy that can catch passes out of the backfield, and he's explosive. Who does that remind you of? DeAndre Swift. Like that's what Travis Etienne could be. He could be a less efficient runner than what he's not going to run as well as a guy like Nick Chubb. Like he's nowhere near in the same ballpark. But we saw that with Swift last year. Swift's PFF rushing grades and things like that, they were really bad. Like he didn't, and even Jay Moyer was pointing out on film, so was Matt Waldman. But it didn't matter because the game scripts dictated it because the Lions suck so bad. What are the Jaguars probably going to do this year? They're probably going to suck. And so they're probably going to need to run the 2-minute offense. They're probably going to need to run a lot of plays. I think it's just a situation where James Robinson's probably, going to take longer to get back from injury than it's going to be for ETN. And I could see these roles carving up in a way where it's just, even if Robinson might be the better running back, like the way it's all going to work out is ETN's just going to end up being the guy that's going to be on the field like we saw with Swift last year. So I really do like getting him. I'm pretty much avoiding Robinson right now. I know we just saw Akers come back, so like there's some hope here. But again, not a lot of draft capital invested in James Robinson. The injury occurred, later in the season. So we'll have to see what I like James Robinson. I think he's a good player. But we've seen these players like this, man. They don't have the draft capital or anything. The NFL, man, they'll just wash their hands of them. They'll just bury them on the bench. So no matter how good they may look, that's one thing I've learned. Like, and so like when you're listening to analytics versus the film crowd, hopefully like you find, this intersection where you can really bring both together. But I find one of the weaknesses when we get over engaged in the film is, and a lot of times the NFL, they just don't give a shit. They don't care. Like if they don't have capital invested in these guys, it just doesn't matter. And it really shouldn't be that way. Because if you could get more out of a player that costs less, you think you would be really interested in making that work as a GM and as a coach. But for whatever reason, so far that hasn't been the case. So I like ETN, and I'm definitely going to get plenty of exposure to him where he's going. I was actually just trying to pull up like the latest FFPC, like where you guys know like where he's going now.
I've got the Fantasy Mojo up. You're looking at
5.7.
You're looking for J-Rob?
Yeah.
No, ETN.
No, for ETN.
Yeah, he's fourth or fifth.
5. Yeah, he's going round 5, pick 7 right now. So here's the thing, though. Like with ETN, like Theo, I think the guy you brought up just 2 players ago is like the same player for a 9th round pick, Chase Edmonds.
Yeah.
So that's going to make it tougher when you start thinking about, and that's what I try to think about, like which players are alike and what their roles are probably going to be. And I would say ETN and Chase Edmonds' roles could probably be very similar, but you get one in the 9th round and the other one you're having to spend a 5th round pick for. Now, I think there is a case to be made that ETN just completely takes over the backfield. Not that that's not within Chase Edmonds, range of outcomes as well. So I'm going to want some exposure, but even just as I think through these things, even live right now, I don't know how much I'll have just because of some of the backs you can get later. The other thing with ETN, like, do you guys want to take ETN or you want to take James Conner? Like ETN, definitely the younger player. But I mean, to me, like if I had to pick in a vacuum, I would take James Conner over Travis Etienne.
I'm with you on that, but I think Connor will head up, and ETN.
You're probably
stay
right.
in that kind of that murky zone. I'm on ETN though. I think that everything that the Jaguars have done this offseason has been adding speed. Kirk, Ingram, and I think that they're going to do. I think they'll try their best to feature ETN and get him out in space and do all those things that we were excited about. When he was at Clemson, I think that Peterson will probably rotate backs, but I think that there's a chance that ETN sees a good enough percentage of the touches that he could pay off at where you're talking about him going.
Right. Yeah. Let's just to skip ahead a little bit. Let's hit the Falcons. There's another situation where there's I don't know how much you guys trust Cordarrelle Patterson. I don't. I've just been playing fantasy football too many years and seen too many, of these guys, kind of come out of nowhere in their late 20s or even 30, like Cordarrelle was, and they have this insanely good year, and then everybody chases it the next year, and they're worth absolutely nothing. Kind of like Mike Davis 2 years ago. We all thought Mike Davis, after he did so good filling in for Christian McCaffrey in Carolina, and then he moves over to Atlanta, everybody's drafting Mike Davis early, and he ends up leaving everyone disappointed, and then ends up being Patterson coming in. So what do you think is going on with the Falcons? Are they drafting a running back? They're going to wait till late free agency and try to sign somebody cheap like Melvin Gordon, or what do you think?
Dwain, hold your answer, brother. Hold your brother. Wow, I'm tripping.
I'll also hold my brother.
It's one of these nights, man. My daughter's not feeling well. I came into this thing with my head in the cloud, so I apologize. But we're 75 minutes in. We could talk to Dwain literally for hours, and we will answer that question, and we will drop a couple more if he's good to stay. But we got to give a quick shout out. This show is brought to you by our friends at the FFPC, myffpc.com. Guys, if you're not on there doing best balls right now, playing for $1 million, playing for 50 grand, playing for 25 grand, best balls, you got to go sign up. myffpc.com right now. Go sign up. Tag one of us, Theo, Dan, myself, or at Goat District. We'll hook you up with a sign-up bonus. You can use that $35 to a free best ball, a $35 best ball, or towards a dynasty team. Right now, dynasty startups are started. They've got orphans for sale still. They started the main event drafts. You can sign up, get your spots. Guys, get on myffpc.com. And Dwain, we'll get back to you, brother. Answer Dan's question.
Yeah, it's a nasty backfield right now. And I'm good for a while if you guys are, like at this time of night, like I'm good.
Appreciate that.
I can go whatever you want to do. But yeah, the Falcons are another team that have multiple picks. They've got pick 8 overall. Obviously, they're not going to take it back there. But in round 2, you've got pick 43, pick 58. Round 3, pick 74, and pick 82. So they've got in those first 3 rounds, you got 5 picks that you're going to have to avoid. So for me with Patterson, I agree with what you're saying, Dan. I think and last year, look, I was basically like, I didn't buy into Patterson. I wish I had bought into it more, but my thought process was like, look, I mean, this guy's been around for how long, and now all of a sudden we think this is going to stick. But now that I actually saw that Arthur Smith was able to do it, and how good he was until the high ankle sprain hit. And the fact that, yeah, he is older, but the guy has no tear on him. Like he has no wear and tear. He does have age, like age does matter, but the role they play him in, where he lines up, because more than any other back in the league, he gets to line up out wide. He gets to line up in the slot. They do all sorts of different things with him. And the fact that now Calvin Ridley's gone, you got Russell Gage gone. Like, I think he's going to be a huge facet in the passing game because they're going to have to. And I think he is good enough to, he'll never be a 25, 30% target share guy. That's the kind of thing that would have already happened, right? But I think he's a good enough player that they can manufacture touches for him around the line of scrimmage. I mean, as much as we all love Devo Samuel, there were basically 2 Devo Samuels last year. The other's name was Cordarrelle Patterson, like for the first however many weeks of the season. And so it's funny. What I like about him is just the price tag. Like, it's another back that's going, basically in the 10th round. And so again, like, you can load up on these receivers, and especially in a best ball, like having Cordarrelle Patterson, Chase Edmonds, and James Conner and Kareem Hunt. Like, if I had those 4 backs and I loaded up receivers early and came back and hit a few more, and if I already had my tight end, like, man, like I think I would feel pretty good, like, about my team. Not that I don't want to have some teams where I'm, getting some of these elite backs at the very top, of the draft. But I think Patterson would definitely be in the mix for me. I think where, it would start to change is if all of a sudden people thought, oh, well, they didn't draft a back, so now Cordarrelle Patterson should go like in the 5th round or something. I would totally be out on that. Yeah. But at ADP, I have no problem drafting Cordarrelle Patterson. I think he's probably slightly lower, than he should be. He's probably about right, but I mean, I think he's a little bit low right now.
Yeah, I think he's probably, either a little low or about right.
Where's he going right now? I can't find him for some reason.
9,
like 10th round, 9th. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's one of these guys, he's got a pretty wide spread. Like, you'll see him go as early as the 7th round, but seeing him go as late as the early 12th.
Is he showing up as running back on every platform, or is he still
Yep.
I know he was on a couple as receiver.
Yeah, I think he's running back everywhere this year.
Yeah, the running back where I've seen anyway. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and Patterson, the thing that he showed last year was just that it wasn't just touches, like the explosiveness was there. And so I think that's the thing that, gets you excited. And it ended up being at 13%, but it was above, plays of 10 yards or more. And that's just running. Like, he surprised me how well he did running the ball. And then in the receiving game, obviously, he played really well as there as well. 23% of his plays went for 15 yards or more in the receiving game. So yards per route run, elite 2.23. His PFF receiving grade was a 91.4. That's insane. So knowing those things, I think at the price tag, you can get him. I think, especially like in best ball, I like him. But man, I just think back last year, like in the first 8 weeks, like, you were happy to have Cordarrelle Patterson as your RB2. Like, you were just elated to be plugging him in, or if it was a league where he was a receiver, just plugging him into a flex.
What about the Philadelphia Eagles, Dwain? Do we have any hope for Miles Sanders right now, or is it going to be an ugly committee with Scott and Gainwell and Sanders?
Man, that's one I just think I've seen enough. Not that I wouldn't pull the trigger on a Miles Sanders share. I just, and these things can still happen. Like, he could still, go off, but like, he's been in the league too long to not really, do enough. And the thing for Sanders, like, that has been most disappointing for me is, like, he's just never really developed that receiving part of his game. It seems like they just really want to use Boston Scott. They've got Kenneth Gainwell who can do that. And then, they want to make him split early down carries. I know Jordan Howard's not re-signed right now. And then, Jalen Hurts runs the ball. So I just think there's too many, there's too many different obstacles in his way, even if the Eagles want to be a really run-heavy offense, which we don't have a guarantee that they will. Like, they could, if Jalen Hurts takes more steps forward, like, they could move more back to being a balanced team, right? I don't think they're ever going to try to be pass-heavy like they were at the beginning of last year. But Miles Sanders last year, in having to share the workload with so many players, what was protecting him to having any value at all was the fact that the Eagles were the most run-heavy team in the league, down the stretch. And that's really what kind of helped him at least maintain some value. But at this point, I just think he's a player that, I'm really not going to be trying, to draft. He's another guy I'm trying to look at real quick, where his most recent ADP is, over on FFPC. Where is Miles Sanders?
Going about 9th round.
And guys, we were talking about Patterson. I'm looking at the last 7 days on FFPC. He's going in the middle of the 6th, guys.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm looking at best ball slim, so I don't know what you're looking at.
I don't
but
do
it's
slim. Come on, Dwayne. That's for boys. Come on.
Yeah, I prefer best ball
I love
slim.
the slims. I love the slims.
I'm
Don't
teasing,
say that
man.
around Dan.
I'll
Dan
draft
is the
slim,
purist.
fat, large, tall. I don't really care what.
And honestly, the one I go to is the one that I think I've just seen more drafts finish in. So I don't know how many of the best ball, like 28 rounders, looks like. There's a few less drafts that have finished, which is why I picked the slims. But yeah, so Patterson over in the slims, is showing 9.6 in the last 15 drafts. But yeah, if he's going that high, there's no way I would take him, in that range.
Yeah.
Man, people hate running backs. Miles Sanders. Like, I don't even like Miles Sanders, but in the 9th round, I'm kind of like, well, I mean, I don't know.
Well, he's going around some of the guys we talked about, right? The Edmonds, he's going around like the sexy Ramondre out there in New England.
Yeah, I mean, look at Kareem Hunt. I mean, going in the 8th round. Like, I mean, it's funny, like how quickly, like people, this makes me want to like draft 50 teams tonight. Like Kareem Hunt was solid even in the beginning, of last year. He started hot out of the gate, obviously RB5, but then 14 had week 5 an RB9 finish, or week 5, week 9 had an RB3, and then he finished the year with 2 top 10 RB finishes between weeks 14 and 18. Like in best ball, man, like Kareem Hunt, like I like his profile. Oh, sorry. I mean, I'm looking at Nick Chubb. I'm an idiot. 16, sorry. So 16, here's his first. Still, though, still good. Like week 1, RB16, week 3, RB2, week 4, RB16, week 5, RB7. Like those are very usable weeks, in best ball. And with Kareem Hunt, like we've seen him do that, over the years. Like the beauty of his role, and it kind of really sucks for Nick Chubb, is like whenever the Browns get ahead and they're trying to salt away a victory, they pull Chubb off the field. Whenever the Browns get behind and they have to throw the ball, Kareem Hunt's on the field. If they're running their 2-minute offense for any reason whatsoever, Kareem Hunt is the running back on the field. So it's like he has all these different paths that you could argue his role is more insulated than Nick Chubb's, even though he's not quite, as explosive, doesn't get the touchdowns that Nick Chubb. But game script wise, like he's almost more insulated than Nick Chubb.
Which is crazy because I remember early in the offseason, Dwayne, listening to you, and I think you had Chubb, like you were kind of assuming, right, that Hunt was gone, and you had him like top 5?
No, that was Devante.
Oh, is it
Devante Williams with Melvin Gordon? Yeah. No, but Chubb, I did put out a tweet like earlier this week. Is like, I'm not even looking at the retweets of it anymore because, like, it's what people say about you. But at first, I got a pretty good laugh about it. But I basically said, look, if everybody had a full down role, and this is basically me trying to shine a light on players. So obviously Christian McCaffrey would be in this, but the way I worded the tweet, who cares? You guys know me well enough to know, like, I love good players. So I like Christian McCaffrey. But what's funny is then my ranks come out and they're like, you get Christian McCaffrey too? What are you, an idiot? But anyway, when you look at Javonte Williams, you look at Nick Chubb, and you look at Jonathan Taylor, like if they all had full workloads, that, like if every back in the league, if things were equal and they all got these big workloads, those would be the 3 backs that I think would most likely finish at the top, like, just because they're so good. Now, that doesn't mean I think they're going to get those workloads. So, but Javonte right now, so far so good, but I just feel like every day that Melvin Gordon doesn't sign, the more likely he's not going to get the money he wants. And does he just come back to Denver because he likes it there?
An opportunity to win, right? He's getting up there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and he's just, you get Russell Wilson now. It's a good city. My guess is you're going to get Melvin Gordon back. Now, some of these backs are going to push the limit, right? They're going to wait and see if a training camp injury happens. But at that point, the thing you got to remember is like more of the salary cap's gone because it's been allocated to rookies. So it's kind of
you're on like league minimums and stuff. No, at that point, in a lot of cases.
Do what?
Are you, and Dan might know, I don't know, like is that more like you're getting thrown league minimums at that point when it's just like second, third week of the season and guys are getting hurt and they need a body?
Well, if it's preseason and depending on the team, like if the injury happens to the right team that they happen to have the money, you might get a little bit more. But typically the market is so dried up, so it just depends on what the player's looking for. If they're looking for a chance to start, even though they may have to take less money, then they may wait. Right. If they know they want to go ahead and lock in money, they may do it, earlier. So, I mean, I think it really depends to each player and what their goals are, like, and, what their agent's telling them, to be honest.
Yeah. And I think with a guy like Gordon too, I think he's at this point pretty likely to wait until after the NFL draft to sign, because that point, I think there's going to be another flurry, especially for a running back, because there are more teams that really want to add a running back than there are really good running backs to add. And so a guy like Gordon, I think, if he's smart, he just kind of holds out now and says, yeah, I'm still interested in, Denver. He's trying to keep his options open there, but, just wait until after the draft. And if Atlanta doesn't sign a guy or doesn't draft a guy, they might be interested in, a guy like Melvin Gordon. So, and they might have some money for him.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe New York, the Jets we talked about.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Don't get Theo all agitated. Like we already put him.
He loves his Jets, man. He loves his Jets.
We already.
No, I love my Michael Carter. Don't mess with
I think there's
your Michael Carter, your Elijah Moore. I love my Carter too, man. For sure.
I don't know if this one's on the list.
The draft is scary though. You got to admit, right, Theo?
It's absolutely scary. We've talked about Michael Carter as a dynasty buy with risk, but you're rolling the dice. Just like anything in fantasy football, you got to weigh the costs. And Michael Carter costs a hell of a lot less now than he would in a couple of weeks if he survives the draft. So survive the draft, and he's worth a ton, and a lot more in dynasty, a lot more in redraft.
Yep.
I don't know if this one's on the list, but I definitely want y'all to say, what are you guys doing with the Chiefs backfield?
Avoiding it at this
Don't
point.
Everybody speak at once. Just a collective gasp.
Yeah.
I have tried to. I have one ugly share of Clyde Edwards-Helaire in Dynasty that I've tried to sell, but I'm not selling for nothing, just on the chance that he can bounce back. But I'm not optimistic about this backfield at all. I think it could be a real mess. The Ronald Jones signing is weird. I think McKinnon will be around. It seems like a mess.
One thing I like, Dwain, I love listening to you just in general, but one thing I really like is when you're talking running backs, because he's going, 7th round right now, Clyde Edwards? Yeah. And you talk in my language when you're talking about ownership, right? And, you talk about Pittman, maybe 20%, 25%. For me, Clyde, he's one of those guys, maybe I want 10, 15% just because of his price. But it's hard, man. It's hard to think that he's been in that offense with the power they've had. And I don't know, put another guy in that situation. I just feel like you're getting so much more out of it, So it's hard to see that offense kind of lose weapons. The offense is not going to be as opened up, you would think, with Hill gone. So can you still see CEH improve fantasy production wise?
Yeah, the narrative I've heard, and it makes sense to an extent. You sign Ronald Jones. We know Ronald Jones is not a pass receiving back. I love my Ian Hardett's PFF. We do pods together every day. You guys know Ian. He's awesome. He's funny as shit. And he's like, Ronald Jones is so bad at receiving. He literally caught a touchdown pass that was a touchdown catch. The ref said no catch. Most receivers will get up and be like, no, I caught it. He just got up and walked back to the huddle. He's like, yeah, I probably dropped it. Let's just face it. The odds are I dropped the damn thing. But with Edwards-Helaire, oh man, yeah, I'm with you guys. I kind of just have a gasp. I don't know what to say. But the problem for me is he's never really shown anything in the receiving game either, which is where we would hope he would pick up, right? That's what we were hoping. Are we getting someone? Everybody knew he wasn't a Jamal Charles, as far as being explosive, thinking of previous Andy Reid backs. But you're thinking, Deuce Staley, he caught the ball out of the backfield. Brian Westbrook, was not a super fast guy, but a quick guy, really good out of the backfield as a receiver. And it just hasn't worked for Edwards-Helaire. And I think that's where we need his value to come from, because he's just not an explosive player. He's a fairly elusive player, but also not even really as good there as we would want. Last year, missed tackles forced per attempt, only 13%. League average is 17%. Rushing attempts over 10 yards, only 8%. League average 10.5. There's nothing in the underlying metrics that are wow, if this player got more work, could they actually be more? And then the targets per route run is the most disappointing thing. So it's not just about they're not putting him on the field in the 2-minute offense. They're not putting him on the field in passing downs. It's even when he's out there. His targets per route run, 12%. That's terrible. That is absolutely terrible. Mahomes is a guy that wants to keep his eyes downfield. And like Kev was even saying, in the chat, and he likes to scramble as well. So I don't know, man. It's just you got that factor. You got the fact that, they just don't really seem to be that interested in getting the ball. I think the only other positive thing you could potentially paint around Edwards-Helaire is he's pretty much been dinged up his whole career. Like, he's missed time, but he's also played with injuries. So is there a chance that really, health has been the primary issue for him as the first 2 years go? But my problem is, like, you can't beat out Darrell Williams and Jerick McKinnon for touches once you finally got healthy. That's like the telltale for me.
Especially in the playoffs. Who do you remember in the playoffs for the Chiefs? For me, it's McKinnon and Wheeler.
Yeah.
You could easily see McKinnon because he just looked better than CH in that offense.
You're not buying him for his skills. You're buying him for his offense. And that's
his draft capital.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to. Like when Helaire gets into the 7th, 8th round, I'm definitely collecting some shares. I don't want to be overweight on him, but I don't want to be, at zero either. I don't see him as a league winner or anything, but I see him as just, he's a player who can contribute. Most of the time, just to put it on a straight fantasy points basis, he's getting you 10 to 20 fantasy points if he's in the game. Which is something you can work with at that point of the draft. If I'm going to take a guy like him, I'm going to make sure I have some upside guys around him. But if I'm heavy on upside guys and I get to that point in the draft, I might take Clyde Edwards-Helaire just because I think, if he's playing, I can kind of trust him to not throw me a zero.
Yeah, he's more filling in. He's one of the guys that is going to fill in that RB2 spot.
Right.
You're playing that. You got your stud RB1, and you're just playing.
Yeah, he's not your RB2. He's just kind of a guy who can fit.
Yeah. Theo was so disgusted he left.
Couldn't even handle talking about him anymore.
It's that bad.
So yeah, one of the things we're trying to do was get into quarterbacks a little bit. I don't know if Dwain, how are you doing on time? You got, like 15
Yeah,
minutes?
I'm good. Like if you guys want to keep going for a bit more, I'm good.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts because I know you've
I
done a lot of work on.
I got to turn this heater off, but I'm listening. Keep going.
Okay. I know you've done a lot of work on quarterbacks, and your article is out on Pro Football Focus on best ball quarterbacks tiers. And I think most people would probably be surprised to know who you have ranked very high at quarterback, up above Patrick Mahomes, even Kyler Murray. Tell us a little bit about Murray. How did you get to the point where you're as high on him as you are? What are you seeing that you're liking? And how are you seeing the 2022 season come together for him?
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's about building tiers. So I'm thinking about ranges of outcomes. And I think there's basically two quarterbacks in the league that could throw for 4,500 to 5,000 yards and also rush for 750. And I think the two names are Josh Allen and Kyler Murray. I think Josh Allen is the one. And so, again, I try to think of these assets like in those terms, like what is a reasonable range of outcomes. And so some people, Kyler Murray could never do that. Well, guess what? He already has. If you extrapolate his games to 17, which is we play 17 game seasons now. I mean, his passing yards, he's only missed 3 games. He has played hurt, through some other games, which has really impacted his rushing stats. But I mean, his passing yards extrapolated for 17 games have been 39-45, 42-19, and 46-07. So we've already got a player that we know can throw for 4,500 yards. If you look at his rushing yards, same thing, 578, 873, 514. So we've also already seen him have a 750-yard rushing season. So I think to say players that have a reasonable chance of throwing for 4,500 and rushing for 750, it's really him and Josh Allen. Are they going to hit both of those things in the same year? Maybe not, but they're probably going to hit one or the other. And so that's what I like about Murray. I obviously, you take on some risk, with, his size, and he does have to play through some injuries. He does, he's missed a few games. But I just think that's the tier, of those two. And then you have your next tier down. And like Lamar Jackson, he could give you 1,000 yards rushing. Like basically, if you do him for 17 games, he gets 1,000 yards rushing every year. but not going to give you that 4,500 to 5,000 yards passing upside because of the way, that they run their offense. I do really like the weapons around Lamar Jackson, but I think Lamar has QB1 overall potential too, right? If he hits on all cylinders in the right way. I think Josh Allen could be your QB1. I think Kyler Murray could be your QB1. I think Lamar Jackson, could be your QB1. I think Justin Herbert, a little tougher because he doesn't give you the rushing upside, but he's not a minus in the rushing game. He'll give you 300 yards rushing, give you 2 to 3 rushing, maybe 4 rushing touchdowns, and throw for 5,000 yards. Very pass heavy offense, which we like. And then Mahomes is right there with them. He's going to give you 300, yards on the ground, maybe 4, give you a few rushing touchdowns, and he can throw for 5,000 yards. But I think it's just a matter of there's only 2 guys that I see that can really do that, 4,500 plus 750, and it's those 2. But those guys are all real close. So if somebody wants to go with Patrick Mahomes over them, I'm not going to argue. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is a badass, but losing Kyler Murray is enough for me losing Tyreek Hill is enough for me, to not feel like I'm going to be trying to force Patrick Mahomes. I mean, to be honest, I don't draft these guys a lot. Mm-hmm. I feel like this year again, Tom Brady's going to go too late. I'm just going to be like, okay, fine, just give me Tom Brady. Joe Burrow is probably going to continue to rise up boards. Jalen Hurts is still sitting too far down there. You're going to have options once all the hype around Trey Lance settles. Justin Fields is still cheap, at this point. So I think there's a lot of other paths you can go at quarterback. So I don't always take one of these high ones, but I think those are the 5 that I like the most.
Yep, definitely makes sense. How about let's talk Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I love
what happens in Denver. Does he cook or does he just simmer?
I mean, looking at Russ and looking at the last few years, I think they're going to let him cook. I mean, I think, when he's working out what team he's going to go to, I'm pretty sure he had some stipulations of how are we going to run the offense? I don't want to do this again.
Does it matter that the boiling point at Mile High Stadium is lower than at sea level in Seattle?
Yeah. Maybe. my thought on Russ is probably similar to y'all's. Plenty of good weapons. Are any of these weapons elite yet in their own right? No, but they're all good. None of them are DK Metcalf. You could argue that none of them are even Tyler Lockett yet. But whenever you look at them as a group, I think he's got enough really good weapons. I think he'll get to do some different things, in an offense that probably, hopefully, inspire him. Russ is one of these players that's going to want to come out and just really prove everyone. And I'm not so sure that he's completely washed in the running game. If you look at Russell Wilson, I know last year he did not have a lot on the ground, playing through the injuries and everything. He only had 2. He projected for 226 yards over 17 games. But the year before was 543. The 2 years before that, both over 350. The year before that, over 600. It won't go further than that because, we're, obviously he's an older player now. But Wilson's a smart runner. He doesn't take a lot of hits when he runs. He's low, compact, gets down, knows how to slide, takes care of his body. So I still think that Russ Wilson gives you – I think he could be an arbitrage Kyler Murray. I think he could still throw – he could throw 40 touchdowns in this offense, throw for 4,500 yards and rush for 500. And where he's going right now, I think he's one of my favorite, players. Now, his ADP is because people know Russell Wilson so well, it's not quite as low as what I had hoped it would be. It's higher than where, we were with Brady at this point last year, which is where I thought we might get to start out with Russ. So that hurts a little bit, but he and Brady are 2 of the main players that I'm really trying to get my arms around. If one of those top 5 don't slide, Dak would also, be in that group. But I think I'm slightly starting to lean to Russ over Dak.
What about
most of the time, Russ Wilson's going after Brady, Prescott, Stafford. He's kind of going before Rodgers, before Hurts, but he's going as a back end quarterback 1. So, I think there's definitely room for him to, when you take him, you can make a profit off him still. Go ahead, Theo.
Yeah, no, I like Russ as a value as well. I think he's gonna show up and do quite well in Denver. But one quarterback that I'm pretty excited about is Derek Carr getting Devante Adams. What's your expectations for the Raiders offense this year, Dwain?
No, I mean, I think that's another one. So if you look at my tiers, and folks can go find it on PFF, and you don't have to pay. It's not behind the paywall right now. You can go look at my tiers. Running backs went up today. Wide receivers.
It's a must, guys. It's a must. You're drafting
Yes.
right now, best balls. I mean, Dwain is literally the other than my own rankings. It's the only guy that's got updated. No, for real. He's the only guy that's got updated, rankings that that you trust in. You guys are hearing him tonight, man. It's a must follow and make sure you're subscribed to the site.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I like Carr. So I think there's a tier of quarterbacks, and it's Kirk Cousins, who's now going to get to play with Kevin O'Connell, probably going to run a lot more 11 personnel, probably get to throw a little bit more than what we got to see with Clint, Kubiak, and then before that, Gary Kubiak / Stefanski. So I think we'll see a little bit more pass-happy version of the Vikings. And then there's Derek Carr and the Raiders, and then there's Ryan Tannehill. I feel like that's kind of a tier. Once you get past the upside quarterbacks, and the upside quarterbacks, I would call rolling the dice on Deshaun Watson. You've got Trey Lance, and you got Justin Fields, right? Then you got your proven guys really above that. But I think Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins easily could score in the same range as, they've got upside to get up there towards, a Dak. They've got an upside to some of the non-scrambling quarterbacks that we think could throw for 4,500 to 5,000 yards. I think they're definitely, in that conversation. And with Derek Carr, I mean, we even saw it last year. It's going to be a new offense under Josh McDaniels. But at this point, when I look at him, I love the weapons. I've got, three guys that were really the most, three of the most double covered weapons in the league. So Devante Adams saw more double or help covers than any player in the league last year. And then Hunter Renfrow, amazingly, was the second most bracketed player in the league, behind only Devante Adams. So bracket is true double coverage. It's either inside out or over under coverage by two players on defense. And then Darren Waller was, I believe, I don't have it right in front of me, he was in the top 15, 16 in double coverage. So defenses have already been trying to take all three of these players away. And when you have three guys like that on the field, one of them is just going to be open. And Hunter Renfrow will set a record this year for routes run, even though they've added Devante Adams. Because just think about it. When you look at McDaniels and what he's been able to do historically, the beauty is he doesn't take his slot receiver off the field. He just puts him at the Z and they move him around. They put him in motion. He's done it with Wes Welker, did it with Julian Edelman, did it with Danny Amendola. He's even done it with Jacoby Myers over the last couple of years. So I hear some people that, that was just Wes Welker. No, actually, it's literally every slot player almost that he's ever had. He has had out there for at least 90% of the routes. Hunter Renfrow is a guy that's only seen 75% of the routes per drop back in his career. Now, he takes a hit to his personal value because Adams, obviously, and then you already have Waller. I thought Hunter Renfrow had sneaky upside to get to 28, 29% target share before Devante Adams arrived. But this is a Derek Carr conversation. And so, look, just with those three weapons and the type of quarterback he is, which is he's going to drop back, he's going to go through his progression, and the one that has the mismatch, he's going to him. It's going to be really hard for one of those to not be open pretty much every play. That's two really good players. Three really good players that all can work in different areas of the field. They don't really have a vertical player. If they still had Henry Ruggs, to stretch the vertical seam on top of that, that would be really awesome. I would like to see them do something on the outside besides Brian Edwards at this point, just to give them some speed, even if that player doesn't get a lot of targets. They had Deshaun Jackson at the end of last year. But man, just going back to Carr, looking back to last year and looking at how he started the year, I think a lot of people actually forget what he did out of the gate. He had a QB 9, QB 8, QB 11. Then he had a 24 and a 31, but then back to a QB 12 and a QB 14. And that was with lesser weapons in an offense that probably ran the ball more than what we're going to see with Vegas, how they're going to approach it this year. So, yeah, I do like Carr. I think the upside, the very tip upside case is he could throw for 5,000 yards and maybe throw 35 touchdowns. I'm pretty comfortable though, putting him around 4,500 yards. Again, I haven't projected him, but 4,500 yards and 30 touchdowns feels like almost a lock. And so I love him, matching him with a Justin Fields. If you want to go upside with a player like Fields and you can match him with Carr, I think that's a really good combination. Or if you decided you wanted to roll the dice on Deshaun Watson, right? I think Carr is a great player, to have with Deshaun Watson. And so he's a guy that I'm going to have a ton, Theo, because we know, looking at these, a lot of the good work that's been coming out over the last couple of weeks, you look at what Hayden Winks and what other people have done, really the two quarterbacks in best ball and that's pretty much how I tried to go last year. But I think going with the two quarterbacks is really the best way to go. And I think Derek Carr makes a great number 2.
Another offense that's seen a lot of changes is Tua Tagovailoa and the Miami Dolphins. We touched on them when we talked about Chase Edmonds. What's your expectations for Tua? Is he a quarterback that could break in and be a usable weekly fantasy starter? What are your expectations for that offense as a whole and Tua in general?
Yeah, I think with Tua, number one, I don't think we've necessarily seen enough to just say that we all know. So I think, there's times when we're doing this, I know we all just want to have really firm takes. It hasn't been great. I'll say that. So for the time we've seen Tua on the field, there's been some good moments, but there's also been some really bad moments. And it seems at this point, like if you had to typecast him, you would feel like he's a game manager, right? But I think he could have more upside than that. But here's the thing. Like he plays with who? Mike McDaniel. Mm-hmm. Who does he come from? Kyle Shanahan. What has Kyle Shanahan pretty much, made a living with? Game manager quarterbacks, So I think he's going to be enough to support the offense. But I think you're hard pressed to really find a team that you would say this team absolutely has better weapons than what he does. So I expect an upgrade in the scheme. I think he's going to see easier looks than he's seen his entire career to this point based off of the way they're going to run the offense. Everything will be based off the wide zone, the running game. Linebackers are going to be tied up, worried about play action. I think you're going to see a lot more play action. You're going to see more under center. And then you're going to see him be able to just basically be the point guard. Like kind of like what he did at Alabama. Hey, Tyreek Hill is behind the linebacker in front of the safety on play action. Like, just get it to him. Like, he's 8 yards down the field and then let him do his thing. Guess what? You have another player very similar to that on the other side in Jalen Waddle. You mentioned what he gets underneath with Chase Edmonds. I think the odd man out is probably Gesicki. I'm not that excited about him. But as far as for Tua, like, it is another weapon. Like, Gesicki is another weapon that he's going to be able to have on the field. Cedric Wilson is a nice ancillary piece. We'll see what they do with Devontae Parker. But like the way I think of Tua is like he could potentially be an arbitrage play on like what we might think about Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr. Like I always try to think like what if these guys hit their ceiling, like what group do they move into? I think for Carr, if he was to hit his ceiling, like he could move up into like, that, not quite to Tom Brady and those guys, but he could be an elite. He could end up having an elite pocket passer year. I think Tua could make that leap up and be like, oh, wow, like he's kind of sitting in that same range with Kirk Cousins at his median outcome, or at Ryan Tannehill at like, his 75th percentile outcome. Like I think Tua could get into that range, being a facilitator, getting the ball to his playmakers. And if all of a sudden he surprises us and like he really is better than what we've seen, well then like you're really talking about a player that could have some upside. I'm not necessarily like forecasting him that way, but I definitely acknowledge that we haven't seen enough of Tua to know for sure that it may not still be in there somewhere.
And most importantly about the Miami Dolphins offense, do you see Tua as a quarterback that can support 2 top 20 wide receivers? I think that, saying top 24 for them would be disappointing. 2 guys in the top 20. Do you see it?
Yeah, I think he can support 2 guys in the top 20. I think where it becomes challenging is when you have 3 really good targets. You got a run heavy offense. We don't know how heavy they'll be. They could be more balanced. My guess is they're going to run the ball quite a bit though. So we're not, and they're not going to run a real fast pace. That's just not. Now McDaniel could come out and really do his own thing. Like we don't know for sure. So we can only just kind of speculate based on like their roots and where they've come from. But these coaches will throw us curveballs and they'll surprise us. But based on everything we know today, I would expect them to be run balanced. They'll pass more when they need to. But I think based on efficiency alone, I think it can support 2 top 20 guys. And here's the challenge. Like, I mean, I want y'all's thoughts. Like the problem for me is like when I'm ranking, because I'm working on my wide receiver tiers right now. Actually, I was working on them before we hopped on here. And I'm writing that article as I'm going and looking at Jalen Waddle. So I've got Tyreek Hill as my wide receiver 5. He's in my second tier. First tier is Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. Devante Adams and Tyreek Hill used to be in that same tier. Now they're in one tier below. They're still elite players, but I do think they take a hit, right, going where they're going. But then when you look at the players behind them, like I don't know that I can move Tyreek Hill below A.J. Brown. I love A.J. Brown. Maybe they belong in the same tier, but I don't feel strong enough to feel like I'm going to take Tyreek Hill after A.J. Brown, right? Same thing, I love CD. I really like CD a lot, but I think he's right there in that range. But then I get to my next tier, which is T. Higgins and Jalen Waddle. So it's two young players that have absolutely shown what they can do, but they have a lot of they're going to have a lot of competition around them for targets. But where my challenge comes in, like Jalen Waddle, I have a hard time dropping him. I'm going to take him over Mike Evans. I just am. Like, I'm not going to take Mike Evans over him because I'm still going to buy into the young talent. So sometimes what I'm saying here is like projections and rankings, like they don't always exactly meet, because I just want to be in on the younger player like Waddle that's shown me can come out and take a 24% target share in his rookie season, at a 1.75 yards per route run, get over the 75 PFF receiving grade, which has been like enormous for these receivers. Like, he's checked so many different boxes for what you want to see a rookie do. I think there's a real good chance, to your point, Theo, that, you know, even as Tua just really being a point guard, like you can see 50% of the targets just go to these two guys. Tyreek Hill's never been a 30% target share guy either. I think Gesicki is the odd man out. I think Gesicki is going to be stuck. Like, Gesicki's not getting 20% in this offense. He's just not good enough. He's also going to be challenged.
I didn't like him going back to Miami for that reason, especially after they make these moves, you know?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people look at it and they're like, oh, but this is a great offense for the tight end. It is, but Gesicki really struggles. Gesicki's a slot player. This team's going to be running 12. They're going to run 21 personnel. They've already added Alec Ingold as a fullback. There's going to be a lot. And 21 personnel, you can count on it. Mike Gesicki's not going to be on the field. And this team's going to use it 25% of their plays, most likely. And then they're going to use some 12 because they have multiple tight ends. That will get Gesicki on the field a little bit more. I think 11 personnel is where Gesicki has the best chance to get on the field. But even then, they signed Cedric Wilson. Are they just not going to play Cedric Wilson? Because he plays in the slot. You know, so are they going to play Cedric Wilson outside if they move on from Devontae Parker? I guess that's a possibility. But Waddle also moves into the slot. So I feel like Gesicki's in this real fragile spot where he can't block, so he can't be out there in some of their base personnel. Where he works from the slot, they've got multiple other players they're going to want to get into that spot. But again, like, this all for me circles back to Tyreek Hill, to Jalen Waddle. I do have them both inside my top 12. I think, again, like, am I saying it's absolutely going to happen? No, but it just starts once I get to a certain point. I'm like, man, like Jalen Waddle, I'm not moving Jalen Waddle below DK Metcalf with the challenges Seattle's going to have this year. And I love DK Metcalf, but I'm just not going to move Jalen Waddle below him. I'm not going to do it. Like, I'm not going to move Jalen Waddle below DJ Moore, who I also like, but DJ Moore's got a terrible quarterback. Like, so I get to this spot where, like, well, some people are going to look at this and be like, man, you're an idiot. There's no way both of these guys can finish in the top 12. But then my question becomes, well, you tell me who you're moving Jalen Waddle below. Like, tell me that, and then we'll go from there. And I'm not – some people may have some really good answers. Like Ian today, he's got him at 16. Like, he wants DeAndre Hopkins over him. He wants Keenan Allen over him. He wants Mike Evans over him. Like, I could see getting exposure to Hopkins and Allen over him. There's no way I'm taking Mike Evans at this point in his career over Jalen Waddle. And I like Mike Evans. And Mike Evans has his own challenges. He's got multiple weapons on his offense as well.
Yeah, and we talk about guys with week winning upside and elite talent, and we also play in NFFC and FFPC. So you think about a guy who could go on a 3-week tear. That's Jalen Waddle. So it's, I like taking the optimistic approach with the younger, exciting talent as well. And that Dolphins
he is an interesting player that a lot of people are asking about, though. So, like, I mean, I am interested. Like, Dan, JD, like, where are all of you on this? Like, I'm also open to changing my views. That's where I'm. We're sitting here in March. We got a long way to go. So
he's a high end.
You may change my mind. That's just where I'm at.
High end wide receiver 2 for me. I mean, I think I'm still very excited about him, and I'm excited to see what he does with Mike McDaniel. And I think having a elite alpha wide receiver like Tyreek Hill that can stretch the field across from him is going to open up a lot of things for him. We saw T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, excel next to one another. We've seen it time and time again. I don't see any reason why a guy who had over 100 catches as a rookie is somehow going to regress to the point where he's not just crushing in year 2. How about you, Dan?
Yeah, I'm still bullish on Waddle. As Theo and JD know, I was crushing him in early best balls before the Tyreek Hill trade happened, and I'm liking the fact that he's getting cheaper now. So I don't mind that at all. But I just see, with Waddle on one side and Hill on the other side, I mean, those guys are going to give defensive coordinators fits because they can eat, You can send Waddle deep and send Hill underneath. You can send Hill deep. You can send Waddle underneath. You can be changing up play by play. You can do it from different formations. I mean, the sky's the limit for what can go on there. And so, there's it's going to be really, really tough on defensive coordinators to try to figure out how to cover them. So I'm totally fine with taking Waddle. I'm going to probably have I kind of have him right around Mike Evans right now. So I definitely want to get some Evans because he's a guy who can just go out and score 3 touchdowns on any given week with Tom Brady throwing him the ball. But I find myself in the same place where Dwain is, where I'm going, I don't want to bet against the young guy, who did so much in his first year. I want to make sure I'm making some bets on his side as well. What about you, JD?
Like with Evans, like we love him, but the trajectory is starting to tell off, and we see that with some of these bigger, more physical receivers. He's still a good player, but I mean, yards per route run, like it's already happening. 2.3 down to 1.79, now down to 1.65 last year. Make no doubt about it. Mike Evans is still a very good player, but he's heading like the arrow's pointing down. I feel like Waddle is still pointing up. Now, obviously you're like, yeah, dude, but Mike Evans plays with Tom Brady. And I get it. Like that's an easy argument. Like that's a pretty easy trump card to throw into any argument. So I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I like Waddle, like Dan was hammering before the trade. For me, all these similar to the draft coming up. Like for me, you're buying these talents, especially when there's an opportunity. And for me, Hill coming over there is just an opportunity. This guy, 25% target share as a rookie, top 12 in Yak. Like I mean, he did a lot of this on his own, and that's not going to change. If anything, he's just going to have the attention taken away, like you guys talked about with Hill there. I'm fine taking Waddle. And like you said, it's kind of hard to move those guys ahead of him. The guys that are going behind him, whether you're looking at age, you're looking at opportunity, fighting for targets and not so a narrow target tree in their rightful offenses. So I like Waddle. And for me, like I said, it's just an opportunity for like guys, if Hill wasn't there this year, would you be able to buy Waddle in Dynasty right now? Right? It'd be impossible. So this just gives you the opportunity to maybe add him to your roster. He's still in the same trajectory, in my opinion, as he was before Hill got there.
Yes.
Just that if anything, he's making it easier for Waddle now.
Yeah, for Dynasty for sure. Like now's the time to go buy. Like if the owner's freaked out about Tyreek Hill, it's a good time to buy. Like when I look at him, he's really kind of the same to me as Keenan Allen, but younger. Like he plays a lot underneath, gets moved into the slot a lot. They said they're still going to do a lot of those things. But I mean, he's 24 and Keenan Allen's 30 and I love Keenan Allen and I love Justin Herbert. So I'm definitely going to have my shares. But I mean, like if I were to take players over Waddle, like if I were to watch people in drafts, like here's where I wouldn't say they're an idiot. Like you take DeAndre Hopkins over, I mean, I'm fine. I still think DeAndre Hopkins is capable of a 25%, 27% target share year. I don't think it's totally out of the range of outcomes, even though he is kind of starting to go down too. Last year it was a lot with injuries. Keenan Allen's still cooking, probably going to lock him in for 25% of the targets. Mike Evans, to your point, Dan, the touchdowns. Like he can score the touchdowns. He's not going to get this 25% target share year with Chris Godwin back. They're probably going to sign Gronk. You add Russell Gage. Like they're going to spread the ball around. Like fine. I'm most likely taking Waddle 75% of the time over Mike Evans. But the other two, like I get it. Like if you want to take those. But to me, once you get to Metcalf, with the quarterback questions, once you get to Deontay Johnson with the quarterback questions, and he's got target competition as well. I mean, Metcalf does too. Like that's an offense that, do we really think it can support more than 2 receivers without a quarterback and they don't run any plays? Like, so I get into a spot where I'm like, okay, like they're all kind of starting to sound the same. Like, so I'm going to take the player that's already done what I really like at an even younger age. And I really like the offensive coordinator. That's kind of where my mind goes. And maybe I should have Waddle in that tier with those guys. I mean, maybe that's the answer. I don't know.
Yeah, it's tricky to figure out for sure.
Is this the year that the gap between, you talk about Keenan Allen, do we see Mike Williams get closer to Allen, or do we maybe see him flip him? Like some people think Ethereum will flip Bitcoin?
Man, I would be okay with Ethereum flipping. But
Me too.
I had a feeling Dwain might have an opinion on that. We'll do that in the after show.
Yeah. I don't think so because it could happen. Like Mike Williams for me, and again, this is why I want to hear y'all, because like for me, he's a really polarizing player in my mind. There's the first part of his career, which he was fine. He would show you flashes, but he never lived up to really being as high of a draft pick that he was. He was really honestly just a down the field field stretcher, high point guy, contested catch guy. But then last year, coach speak actually came true early in the season. Lombardi came out and said, no, he's going to play Mike Thomas role. We're like, yeah, whatever, dude. Double birds. He did. Like, he played him that way in those first few weeks. And then he got hurt. He hurt his knee. And everything changed after that. Now, his ADOT stayed the same, though. So part of me is like, wow, he came out and he really did use him that way. So he could do that again. And maybe it was just the injury that held him back. And if that happens, Mike Williams is being drafted too low. But there's also the other side, which was really for Mike Williams' career, which is a way longer stretch. Like, he had never even been at a 20% targets per route run, like, which is insane for a guy that was drafted as high as he was. So it's like, he's a guy that I really get torn on. There's this small sample size that makes me think, man, there's a bigger ceiling than maybe what I'm giving him credit for. But then there's this huge track record that's like, oh, man, I like Mike Williams, but I really think he's just a wide receiver 3 is all that he is. And so, to be honest, I just hedged. I just put in between those two in my ranks. And sometimes you just have to do that, right? And that gives you a chance that you can get exposure to them when the ADP is right. He's a player I'm definitely not going to reach on and be trying to just go nuts with. But whenever ADP works out the right way, that's whenever I'm going to scoop up my shares of Mike Williams. What do y'all think?
I'm still a Keenan Allen guy. I think that he's been a bargain for the last few years, and I think that when you look at him, he's just so solid, and I think that he's aging gracefully, and Herbert loves him. So with Mike Williams, I'll draft him, but I'm not as excited as I am about Keenan Allen.
Yeah, I think I own 1 or maybe 2 shares of Mike Williams, and I own several shares of Keenan Allen at this point. Probably 8 or 9 shares or so of Keenan Allen. So I'm much more comfortable with Allen. I feel like almost no matter what Mike Williams does, Keenan Allen's going to be just fine where he's at. He's not going to lose me leagues. So that's kind of where I've been. I don't know. I just haven't. I've always been looking at somebody else when Mike Williams is kind of, up in the queue where I would be thinking about him.
Yeah, I guess the tough thing is the defense is supposed to be that much better, and they're already pretty good, so it's not like they're going to be launching the ball. The division that they're in is definitely going to make them have to score points. But, with 2 guys like that, you don't want to have a shitty defense so they could be launching the ball. But I find myself, sometimes I was skipping Allen and then grabbing Williams later. But in that offense, I almost rather just get Eckler and Herbert,
Yeah.
And I've kind of been fading the receivers on that offense just because I think he's going to be spreading the ball a bit more. I don't think we're finding a narrow target out there in LA, and like I said, the defense improving is definitely gonna put a ceiling on that aerial offense, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I think the good news is they're very pass heavy, period, and it's just kind of how they're built. They don't necessarily have like a back that they want to pound. So like they're one of the top 5 heaviest offenses in pass rates, like no matter what the game script is. So I think that helps insulate it a bit. But I agree, and Ian and I have talked about this too, like the defense has definitely improved. So even if you're still throwing the ball, like if you're not feeling the need to push the ball down the field, like you're just trying to grind clock, it could definitely impact them. I think it just sticks to me like Williams' first 5 games last year, wide receiver 14, 10, 1, 105, but then a 2, and then he got hurt and it went to 73. He missed a game. Then it was 79, 46, 45, 10, 50. These are PPR finishes, 20, 39, 46, but he finished the season with a 20 spot and then the wide receiver 6 in week 18. And like, if you look at that overall, that's kind of how he's been for his career, right? He'll just have these blow up weeks and then nothing. Like the thing that catches me is like that first 5 weeks and how much they use him. I'm like, man, if they come out of the gate and they do that again by like week 3, we'll all be ranking him in, the top 12 receivers, for the week in our weekly ranks. And that's the thing that like, makes me lose sleep at night is like, okay, what happens in that scenario? How do I account for it?
Shout out to Scott Kobe, who has a great question. Who's a guy in high stakes leagues that you think will fly up draft boards come September? I know I have one in my mind. I wonder if Dwain, you have one, and then maybe we could all share one.
Yeah, I'm trying to think I have several. I mean, we've talked about, some of them already. I think that, again, now some of this does depend on the draft, but I think James Conner, Leonard Fournette, those guys are probably both going to continue to move up. And again, I'll have a full article out on this with my thoughts better collected. I've just kind of been jotting some names down as I go, but I'll have that out next Tuesday if everybody wants to see it. It'll probably be unlocked too over on PFF. But I'm just scrolling. If somebody else has one, they want to jump in, they can. I'm just kind of looking like who I think would be the biggest one.
Kadarius Toney is mine. I think he's going to shoot up all summer long. I just think about like leagues like NFFC. Where
what do you think the reason is, Theo, with that? Like what changes between now and then? That's my question.
I just think you'll get the positive vibes in the offseason where it's going to be more and more clear that he's a massive part of the Giants offense.
So does Barkley follow that trend? That's more my question.
Not necessarily for me. I think it's more of a just a pro Toney thing. It reminds me a little bit of like Jerry Judy last summer, where Dan and I, when we started drafting these teams, that you could get Judy in the 7th round, and all of a sudden by the time Vegas came around, Judy was going in the 4th round. I don't see Toney going up quite that much, but I think Toney's the kind of guy that he's definitely going to be a lot more expensive, come the end of August than he is even going to be in May.
Right. Yeah. I would throw in, in general, I think the Giants offense might be a little bit underrated because I just don't think you can quite emphasize enough how terrible Jason Garrett is as an offensive coordinator and just how much he misused guys. I mean, the way he misused Evan Ingram, the way he misused Barkley, it was awful all the way around. So I kind of like all the pieces of the Giants offense. I'm taking some Galladay, I'm taking some Toney, I'm taking some Saquon, I'm taking Daniel Jones. I think they're all nice values right now. But as far as somebody who's going to really rise up, I think there's going to be a couple wide receivers like Russell Gage, Christian Kirk, where people really start to realize what the value is, especially if Chris Godwin is not going to be ready to start the season. I think Gage is going to shoot up. Christian Kirk, I think he's probably going to be the number one target there. And Trevor Lawrence is a way better quarterback than what we saw last year, toiling under Urban Meyer. So, I think as the preseason moves along and we start getting better looks at some of these players, it's going to really change our opinions on where they belong.
I love the Christian Kirk call, Dan. That's a great call.
So I'll answer this in a little different way, and then I'll have like some very specific take. Like if I just want to give you one of the easiest things you can do is go look at expected draft position over on Grinding the Mocks for these rookies, and then just look at who is there a disconnect on with ADP. So Breece Hall, right, already going high. Kenneth Walker right now, like there's talk that he could be the first back off the board, and if that happens, or even if he's just the second back off the board, like he's going to go way higher than between a 7th and a 9th round pick. Like, so he's immediately going to move because guess what? People don't want the old running backs. That's why you're seeing everyone else fall. What people are going to want is the young back. And so Kenneth Walker, if he's goes in the early 2nd round, like he's going to shoot way up. I have something, if you guys can share it, I don't know who has control, but I have a grid that I just popped up. And so this is an ADP study I did.
Okay.
And it's using FFPC from 2020 and 2021. And essentially, I just wanted to go back and I wanted to do two things. One, I really wanted to look and see, okay, given all the data that's come out recently, which really has kind of been the camp I've been in all along. Like I've always said, you're just better off drafting at the end. You have more information. Yeah, you may not hit on some of the big swings and things like that. But overall, like it's better to draft closer to the season. You've got complete information. You're drafting against more noobs, people that are coming in casually. You've been grinding drafts, for 3 months, and then all of a sudden it's like Christmas. It's like going into a casino and you sit down at a poker table, and immediately you're just like, okay, I'm gonna have all of this money in front of me, like in the next 3 hours. Like you land in draft rooms like that, where all players' values are just falling to you, and it becomes easy. All you got to do is just take the values because you know the way the boards work, and you're thinking multiple steps ahead. But like what I wanted to know is like, is there a reason to be drafting now? Like, if I wanted to draft now, is there a reason to? Is there a potential edge? And if so, like, what is that edge? And so, number one, like, before I even walk through this chart, I just want to let everybody know, like, the time where you see the most large changes in ADP, meaning 24 spots or more. So in most leagues that we draft in, that's 2 full rounds. In February, over the last 2 years, there have been an average of 4. In March, 8. So what's happening in March? You get you're coming out of hearing about the, combine, and you're getting free agency. So that makes sense. April, you're getting closer to the draft. Mock drafts are tightening up. The rookies are starting to move up the board. And then you get to May, what happens to the NFL draft? So if you're drafting right now in March, April, and May, you should be taking players that you absolutely know, or that you think, hey, they're mocking highly, but for whatever reason, there's a disconnect in their ADP. Like, that's the best way if you're drafting today to give yourself an edge that you're not going to be able to get. You're going to have a different edge when you're drafting in August and September. Today's edge is getting access to players that you can't get that cheap when you get to that time frame. So once you get to July and once you get to August, like, it's completely, and I'm looking at something else right now. If you guys are trying, I'm going to walk you through this other chart real quick in a second. But if once you get to July and August, only 1 24 spot mover. August, only 2. So what happened? What does that tell you? Like, once you get to June and July, like, in my opinion, there's not a real reason to be drafting. You don't need to be drafting a ton. Sorry, FFPC, if you guys are listening to this. If you're on the FFPC, completely keep drafting in those months. But you guys know what happens, because we've all done it. We're in the same rooms with the same people over and over. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, you're just trying to figure out, how do I make my team different? Because every draft's almost going the same. So, well, I'm going to make this stack today. I'm going to make this stack today. So I do think that if you're drafting in those months, that probably is a good time to just try to execute your stack strategies. Because once the kind of fish, per se, come in, swim into the lobby, in those drafts, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into trying to build stacks or doing some silly stuff. And now all of a sudden there's all this value falling to you. And you're like, holy crap, I could have built this complete monster just on value drafting alone. So where I'm going with that, this grid that people are now looking at, so this is taking that information from 2021, from 2020, 2021, and this was for best ball. So this is thanks to Fantasy Mojo. He provided this data to me, and then I just was able to put it all together. So ADP change of 12 to 24, a total of 43 over the last 2 years. And what were they? 5 of them were rookies. So this is kind of taking what I just gave you and going a layer deeper. So if players are changing, a lot, what types of players are changing? And it goes to your comment, Theo. Like, look at that second bucket and the third bucket, second and third year receivers, and that's really where Kadarius Toney fits. So what happens is, typically we're seeing that as drafters go through the offseason, we start to gravitate more and more and more to moving the younger players up the board. So Kadarius Toney goes into that. Chase Claypool will still fit in that in the third year. This year, he's a player that's still going too late. Jerry Judy, it already happened because we had Russell Wilson come over, but it would have happened later if it didn't because of Russell Wilson. So what you want to do is you want to gain exposures to rookies now. You want to draft second and third year players now because their ADPs are the ones that are the most likely to go up. Obviously, free agents or trades, and we've had a lot of those this year. So next year, like this number, the average is going to be higher because of the craziness that we've seen this offseason. But like one, I can tell you right now, draft Gronk. Nobody's drafting him. Like, he's basically said he's going to sign. Like, draft Rob Gronkowski.
In a barbershop.
He'll be in the top 10 tight ends by the time the summer's said and done. You can get him for absolutely free right now, even with sharp drafters in your draft room. So a guy like Gronkowski is another one. And then the last one is really vacated opportunities. And I think what happens there is once the draft and everything settles, and these typically happen later, then all of the quote unquote experts, call them whatever you want. Like, I'm not trying to say that, but like, we all do our projections and we put them out there, and it's all based on, well, okay, we think the team is going to throw the ball this many times, they're going to run. And then we have to divvy it up across everybody. So what happens is that's where these players all of a sudden, like, oh, well, Allen Lazard's going to have a bigger role. His ADP is going to rise. Those are the kind of guys that will rise a little bit later once people get into full on like projection season. So the reason I show this, so you can see on the left, and you guys, I do have an article on this. I believe it is also unlocked over at PFF, and you can go check it out. But I fully break all of this information down for you. But all it's showing you is the ADP change, 12 to 24, 25 to 36. Like, how big of a move did they make? And then if they did, what type? But at the bottom, like that row 13, like if for folks that can see it, like that shows you that most of it is rookies. 18% of these big movers are rookies. So draft the rookies now. Second-year players, which Theo just hit on, make up 15% of the movers. So they are the players you should be targeting now. Free agents or trades, it's kind of already happened, but like Gronk is still a laggard. Like there's some guys that could end up in a good spot. So those would be the things if you're trying to think more like macro strategy and apply it to like a pool of players. Like that's the way I'm thinking about it. Does that make sense?
That makes sense because Dwain, you support how I've drafted, so it definitely makes sense. my top 3 running backs on Underdog right now for the big board, the Superflex one is Breece Hall, Zamir White, and Rashad White. Are my top 3 running backs.
There you go, JD.
There you go.
Yep.
That's a pretty awesome chart to break out this far into the pod, Dwain.
And guys, if you're listening on the pod, make sure you check out the YouTube because you got to check out this chart that Dwain threw up on the board. Sorry, Theo.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. And one of the things I love is that the vacated opportunities is a lot less predictive than like rookie or second year. Because the thing that bothers me about vacated opportunities is that talent attracts targets, not, targets don't attract talent. So, there's going to be somebody who steps up, but it's not always who we think it is just because that's the first person in line. So
especially when you've seen a player play for a while, and really this just represent how much they moved in ADP. But like the next step is then, okay, like how many of these things actually pay off, which is the next layer. And it's really the next article I've got to do in this series, but you're already hitting it on the head. The ones that typically don't pay off that make these moves are the ones you just mentioned. So like right now, Alan Lazard, I like Alan Lazard, but he is what he is. And that's where like things like targets per route run, yards per route run, they can tell us that, okay, great. We won't ding them for not being able to get on the field. Fine. We're just going to say that should be a ding, right? If you can't get on the field, like that's step one. Like you got to be good enough that the coach will put you out there. But even then, sometimes you're in a loaded offense. There's different things. So you want to take a layer below that, right? And you want to start to look, okay, well, when they were out there, how often did they get targeted? And man, just none of it looks good for Lazard. Like he's been in the low ones in the yards per route run. He's never hit a 20% targets per route run, been well below that. So like, I think he could be a nice player. And as long as his ADP doesn't get out of hand and you know what you're getting, but don't talk yourself into, because that will happen, especially when, and again, I think that's why it's probably not that profitable to be drafted in June and July. Cause a lot of times we're just trying to find ways to be different and we'll talk ourselves into things like that. So if you're drafting in those months, like make sure your strategy is probably more of a macro level. I'm going to try to build these kind of stacks in these drafts kind of a thing.
Yep. Makes sense.
Guys, I think we've kept Dwain way longer than we probably should have, but
and I'm good. I love you guys. So
yeah, the convo.
Appreciate that, Dwain.
Yes.
Yeah, we appreciate
you guys are probably all tired. Like I'll just keep going.
No, dude, I've got like guys we haven't even talked about. I'm just dying to throw at you. But
do y'all want to do a few rapid fire just to finish? I mean, if I'm good. Well, if you're ready to go, we can go.
Here, I got a rapid fire for you. Okay. All right. Here we go.
Good. Let's throw some rapid fires at them.
All right. So quickly, I'm going to throw this up on the screen here.
Dan, it's supposed to be rapid fire, not
I know.
Campfire.
There we go. All right, here's a list. Who, if you're drafting in best balls, who are the top 3 you're taking off this list? As your quarterback too. If you've held off this long and this is who you have to pick from, who are you taking for your quarterback too? Top 3. Theo, go.
Okay, for me,
this is so easy.
I like Daniel Jones. I like Daniel Jones a little bit off this list right now for the reasons you said, Dan. I think that it's an interesting year for him. And I'm intrigued a little bit about Trubisky in Pittsburgh. I'm not really that excited about most of this list. I know JD's going to go Matt Ryan number 1 here. But for me, it's probably Daniel Jones or Trubisky, the 2 guys I think with a little bit of rushing upside.
All right, JD.
Why you guys always have to just drop my names ahead of me? Yeah. I
go
go
top 3. You can have the same 3 as Theo. It's fine.
I just did it 2. I opted out of number 3.
Yeah. No, I mean he's got it. The only one I'll throw in there for sure, Matt Ryan is the first guy I'll take, but Jameis Winston's not far behind him. I definitely like him with the Saints. And I do think that Daniel Jones is maybe undervalued a bit right now, especially super flex wise.
All right, Dwayne.
Yeah, my order would be Zach Wilson because we know the least. Daniel Jones would be second because of the rushing upside, and third would be Mitchell Trubisky because of also the rushing upside and the weapons. That's actually in my tiers right now. So that wasn't easy. That was a good one.
All right, there you go. And I would go probably Daniel Jones. For whatever reason, I just have a tough time talking myself into Zach Wilson. So I would go probably Jameis Winston and Matt Ryan in pretty much any order.
I'll go one more rapid fire question for Dwayne because I've enjoyed your rookie stuff. Give me your top three incoming rookie wide receivers for Dynasty. And this is without knowing landing spots, so it's a difficult.
Yeah. Garrett Wilson is my number one. Like he's just, I think he can do everything. Like he can get open, he can run after the catch. I think he can play in any offense. So really love him. Some people kind of hold him down because they're like, well, he only had, his target share wasn't as high. Well, whenever you play with a bunch of other first rounders, guess what? Like the ball does get spread around. So that's part of it. And then if you go to my number 2, it is Treylon Burks. And then Jamison Williams is number 3, and I'll give you my bonus. It is Drake London at number 4. So I like all of those guys, and obviously landing spot will matter, but that's my top 4.
Awesome.
All right, guys, let's give a quick word. Guys, go check out Underdog. Use the code DISTRICT, the promo code DISTRICT. You will get up to $100 matched, $100 in your face for free, smashed on your first deposit. MyFFPC.com. We already talked about. Tag one of us. We'll get you an initial deposit on that. Get your gear, GOAT gear. Dwayne, you guys are on there too. FF Hustle, I believe, with the Viridian Global guys and your gorgeous gear to match your hair. Is that not right?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, there you go. So guys, go. If maybe you don't have the coif, but you can get dressed up in the morning and drop some FF Hustle gear, some GOAT gear over there at Viridian Global. They got a bunch of other stuff. I've got the Canadian Best Ball Championships hat on right now. It's t-shirt season's coming real quick. I know, Dan, I don't know about you guys, but we got a bit of a taste today. We had like 2 hours of like 15 degrees and sun in between the rain, the snow, the hail, and all the other crap we've been getting up here. So go check out Viridian Global, guys, Underdog, and myffpc.com. Dwayne, we love having you on, man. And this is the reason, like, we're at 226 and like we could literally keep going. You must do this for a living. I don't know. You're really good at it. Just, I don't know if you knew that, but dude, we appreciate your time. Remind the people where they can go find all your goodness. Guys, this is a must follow. It's a no brainer. Everything about Dwayne is a must follow.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah. So you guys can find me over at PFF, pretty much putting out anywhere from 1 to 3 articles a week. Right now, you can find me on the PFF Fantasy Football podcast most days with Ian Harditz. We usually record that 3 times a week. You can find me on the Fantasy Football Hustle with Brian Drake. We typically record that 1 time a week. And then if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can find me at Dwain McFarland. That's DWAIN MCFARLAND.
You're the man. Theo, tell the peeps who's coming up.
We have Jax Falcone from the Undroppables coming next week. We have Kevin Scott coming on before the NFL draft. We have Abib Agbatoba coming back on the GOAT District. Billy Muzio will be our NFL draft review show. And we have a bunch of other guests that are in the works, but we have some really, really good stuff planned for April. Dwayne absolutely closed out March. So if you enjoyed tonight, expect a lot more from the GOAT District.
Danny boy, anything to close this out with?
Man, 2.5 hours, and it felt like about 30 minutes to me. Honest to God. So
I would love to do a show with you guys where we get Chad on too. Chad Schroeder. I love.
We will make it happen.
Just name like there's so many good people, but like
we'll make it
happen. I would love to
do
one with Chad.
100%. It has to be late for Chad because he doesn't start drafting, but I'll make it happen. That sounds like an awesome show.
Yeah, that'd be great. That's the August special right there.
Yes, I was gonna say we'll keep that for the fall. All right, boys, guys, make sure you tune in, smash the subscribe, smash the like. We appreciate all the support. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Maybe we'll drop this into two 2 pods just to make it more digestible. But Dwain, always appreciate the goodness. Hopefully you guys had a pen and paper. Good luck in your drafts. Make sure you get your rosters tightened up, guys, because FFPC deadline is tonight, right? At midnight. The
in an hour, right?
In an hour. Dan, did we have any last minute decisions to make that we could ask?
You've got until midnight Pacific time, so that's 5 hours away.
There you go.
5 hours. There you go.
Yep.
There you
go. So you still got a little bit of time, but it's drawing short.
All right, guys, go check out your rosters. You don't want Alex and the crew making decisions for you over there at FFPC and your big league dynasty league. So go check it out, guys. My FFPC. We appreciate all of you guys. Be safe, be happy, be grateful, and we'll check you all later.
Go district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offers the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the and I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.